Good evening. I'm Bernard Green, Chair of the Brookline Select Board, and this is the regular meeting of the Select Board for May 20th, 2025. Let's start off with announcements and updates from the Select Board and Town Administrator. I'd like to start off by making an announcement. Moody's, the credit rating agency, took some significant credit actions last week. Because of the rising Trump budget deficit and general disorder in Congress, the U.S. sovereign debt rating was reduced from AAA, like Brookline's, to AA1 on May 16. But on May 15, the town of Brookline had its AAA credit rating confirmed with a stable outlook. Among the reasons given by Moody's are our conservative budgeting, taxpayer support, and our recently revised reserve policies that govern our unreserved fund balance stabilization fund. Moody's noted that because of the policy revisions, the budget reserves are expected to grow, thereby securing our AAA rating. They also cited the town's strong governance, that's us, and favorable institutional structure that includes strong transparency and disclosure practices. In conclusion, to paraphrase Ben Franklin's alleged statement, we have a AAA bond rating if we can keep it. So, also, big news, Brookline is number 231 on U.S. News' best places to live in America, for whatever that's worth. Our neighbor Newton was number 51. For whatever that's worth. So,
haven't we been number one somewhere else? In some other
there are a number of different lists depending on who you ask.
We like the other list better, I think.
okay. Any other comments? Or yes, Michael.
So I had the pleasure of going down to the Hammond Street DPW facilities today for DPW Day, which is an annual event that they hold that bring in both school children and members of the public to see all of their trucks and equipment and facilities there, and to interact with the DPW staff. And I just want to commend all of the departments of the DPW and their work, and sharing their great work with the public on DPW Day.
Great, thank you. David.
On Sunday, there was an event honoring Aaron Forstein, emceed by Paul Warren, who did an excellent job in honoring his life and also in announcing various family members of his and others who knew him well in his life. I guess Paul has more to say on that, but a lot of us were present there. It was very inspirational, and it drew an excellent crowd.
Hear, hear.
Yeah. And also there was Barney Frank.
Right.
Remember him? He used to represent us.
Yep, he spoke well for quite a number of minutes.
Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah.
some good themes. And Bernard and Representative Tommy Vitolo both presented some resolutions, one from the State House and one from that we approved a couple of weeks ago. I think April
15th.
April 15th. That's
Right.
right. Is the day we approved it. And you know, one of the objectives, there's a small group of us that have been working on this for quite a while. You know, it's rare for someone like Aaron Feuerstein to come along in our community and represent the types of values and unique approach to leadership where he, you know, he paid for his employees after the mill burned down for quite some time and rebuilt it selflessly. You know, and ideally, we'll continue to work as a small group. We'd like to see Aaron continue to be honored, which the resolution will do annually, but we would endeavor to see one of our school buildings or libraries or other important institutions of learning be named for Aaron Feuerstein. He is someone that is worthy of recognition and remembrance, and I think the community would be well served by having something like that. There is a petition floating around. You'll see it somewhere on Facebook or through social media. But that's something that we're going to continue to work on.
And make sure you approach the naming committee.
Of course, there's a whole lot of work to be done. Thank you.
John.
A few things to note. word came yesterday that Brookline lost a neighbor who passed away at age 87. Notable for his literary career, his teaching career, and notable for his family. And I'll name the sons first: Theo Epstein
Mm.
and Paul Epstein. Anya Epstein, daughter, a writer and producer for television. Leslie Epstein, who I'm referring to as the one who passed away yesterday, was really highly, highly esteemed for his literary works and for his teaching, mostly at BU. The fact that we have lost somebody who had the kind of literary prominence that Leslie Epstein had is one thing, but the fact that this family is still very strongly identified with Brookline. And, I think we all feel that the sons and the daughter and the survivors of the family are in our thoughts as they go through their period of mourning, and there will be a memorial announced for him in the not too distant future. I also wanted to mention three things. I'll try to do it as quickly as possible that are on our consent agenda tonight. And the consent agenda, lists a lot of things that we approve rather routinely, and they go by pretty quickly. But these three things I'd like to mention because they represent the result of votes taken some time ago to proceed with various construction projects. And now we are actually funding and rolling out these construction projects, and they're significant. One of them is improvements to South Street, Tully Street, Heath Street, and Russet Road. Another is a project that was done at the high school after the big, high school expansion project. There was a discovery of a problem with a part of the historic building that had sort of water coming into the basement. And so there's a major project being done to resolve that problem. And the final project I want to mention is Schick Park improvements. And again, something that required a certain amount of planning and required us to appropriate via the consent agenda tonight, $1.9 million, but something that's going to serve the neighborhood of Schick Park very, very well, I think.
Thank you. It's hard to hear about Leslie Epstein.
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
actually reading about him and his family recently, who, as a family, is an incredible.
Amazing story.
Yeah,
Even have a connection to Casablanca,
right.
the film. Yeah.
Right. Okay, any other, Chaz, would you like to?
Sure. So today, folks may have seen the news. The town released a report called a deficit review by the independent firm Clifton Larson Allen. As you may remember, the select board commissioned that report about 8 weeks ago to look into some of the issues identified by the Town School Partnership and the school committee regarding how the school deficit had been, how the schools came to be at a point where their request for funding was $8.2 million above the revenue projected allocations for FY26, and why at the time there seemed to be a gap between the FY25, that is our current fiscal year, allocation for the schools and what they were projected to be spending. That review lasted over the course of 8 weeks. I want to thank particularly the many members of the school department and the public schools of Brookline who participated in that. They were very willing and open to have those conversations with CLA, and I'm grateful for them and their candor in discussing these issues. CLA also had full access to our system of record, Munis, was able to look in there. They made 11 findings regarding the school operations and tried to map those findings onto the questions that we asked, which were about, what are the reasons for these issues? Are they caused in part by, is it possible that they're caused by a failure to establish failure to follow practices or misfeasance in some way? What are the recommendations for better ways that we could deal with these issues, particularly when it comes to the provision of special education services, since that was in question. And I had been called into question by an employee who departed. And so CLA did its best to answer all of those within the truncated time frame that we had. And I'm very grateful to them for the work that they did. That report has been posted publicly. It is available as part of the meeting materials for the town school partnership meeting that is currently scheduled for Thursday. I've been told that we may need to reschedule that, but I'm looking into that depending on the availability of some of the folks involved in that. But if we do have to reschedule, it will not be for long after. The big takeaways from this are one, some of the issues identified, the school district is already taking affirmative steps to resolve, which is great. It's important to note that, and it's important to highlight progress being made and the importance of having good policies and procedures in place. It's also important to note, as many of the findings in this report say, that policies and procedures are only worthwhile if they're being followed and enforced. And so in addition to policies and procedures needing to be implemented, they need to be followed, and staff need to be confident that they can enforce them and that the consequences for not enforcing them or not following them are clear. And then the other thing that I think this report makes clear is that while there are certain operational things that we can do in the short term to work with the school department to have better policies and procedures, better practices, better ways of providing service that comport with best practices, and additional steps we can take, like an HR review, which is recommended by the report. The underlying issue is what we said it was 8 weeks ago, which is the growth in expenditure asks from the schools far outstrip the revenue projections that we have available to us as a community. And the school committee has already done the arduous work this year of bringing that budget into alignment with what the available revenues are. But in order to do that, they've had to make cuts and in some cases use funds that they had hoped to use next year, which sets up, unfortunately, a cliff of sorts that we're going to have to cross. So I would hope that all of us in reviewing this are committed not just to the immediate steps, the easy steps, the steps that we can take to rebuild confidence in the processes of the schools, but also to the harder steps of talking about how do we ensure that we're not constantly running up against this structural issue. What can we do on the revenue side as a community, and what can we do to control for expenditures? So all of that is now going to come before the town school partnership in terms of the immediate steps and a potential memorandum of agreement, similar to what happened when North Andover went through this last year. And then at the Expenditures and Revenue Study Committee over the course of the next several months, as we discuss where our cost points are, because I will say there are cost points in the town too that are unsustainable that we need to talk about and that we will be talking about over those next several months. And then from the revenues perspective, what can we do to increase those revenues? Where is that going to come from? And what is that going to look like? And where, if we need to cut services, are we cutting services? So thank you to the select board for the initiative you took in stepping in and funding that report. I believe that was a major factor that Moody's viewed favorably when reaffirming our AAA rating, was that your leadership in stepping into a financial crisis and steadying the helm was really important. And thanks to the community for continuing to be engaged on this.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, Tiffany, let's have public comment. Please read the rules.
Thank you for joining us for public comment. This is an opportunity for us to hear your perspective on the issues in Brookline that matter to you. Each person speaking tonight is limited to 3 minutes. You don't need to use the entire time, but you may if you like. Once 15 minutes has been met, there is an opportunity at the conclusion of the Select Board's business for additional comments. Members of the public sometimes raise questions during public comment. We may be able to provide a quick answer to a question, but are more likely to work with staff to get a more thorough answer and respond over email. The on-screen timer will flash orange when you have 30 seconds remaining and red when your time is up. Please conclude your remarks at that time. If you have more to say, you're welcome to send an email to board members expressing your thoughts in greater detail. Any person speaking must identify themselves with their full name and either their Brookline precinct number or street address. The first individual who signed up in advance was Michael McGraw-Herdig.
We read it.
We've got it. We've got it.
All right, throw. Hi, folks. Michael McGraw-Herdig, Precinct 6, Tabor Place, Pierce School parent. To hear about that CLA report. Just kind of off the cuff. So in my day job, it is my job to review postmortems for incidents, which is when something went terribly wrong and it took extensive immediate coordination to fix. That's what happened with the school budget this year. There was a major severe incident. Things went really badly wrong. And we commissioned a report to understand why and structurally what's going on there. When I run postmortem reviews for large, painful incidents, I say, let's be blameless. Let's assume that everyone meant to do the right thing with the tools and processes available to them. And when something breaks badly, it's an opportunity to learn what was broken in our tools and processes and to commit to fix them. We use that blameless perspective in incident review, not because it's nice, but actually because it's useful. It tells us what we can change about the structure of a system beyond any individual to make it resilient and to work better. When organizations blame too much, they end up cycling in new people every 12 or 15 months. Those people keep failing and the systems always stay bad. So I'd like you folks, when you look at this report again, to look at it with a blameless perspective. What does it show us about the structure of the system that went wrong? There's a vignette in here about a federal grant that we almost lost because somebody wouldn't push a button to finalize some numbers because there was a disagreement within departments about the numbers. That's a near miss. That's a ton of money in services to students that we almost didn't make. Why did somebody think they weren't entitled to push the button? Why were they disagreeing about the numbers? What structurally caused that to happen that almost led to us missing out on that money and not providing those services to those students? There's a story in here about people working with vulnerable kids without completing Corey checks. Somebody felt a dreadful sense of urgency in setting that up. They thought that was the only and best way to set that system up. They thought they had to hire those folks that way and get that done. Why did they think that? What in the system, what in the processes made them behave that way? And how can we fix beyond any one person the shape of that system to make things better for all of our kids in all of our schools? And finally, one thing that we didn't talk about, that I didn't hear about or read in the summary of this report so far is the structure of the interpersonal communications between departments. There's text in here that says interpersonal friction over the years has been amplified to the point that employees were limiting their communication to only the people whom they were most comfortable with. It says the finance director was not always included in the budget preparation or meetings with the school committee regarding financial questions, which should fall within that position's job duties. Folks, I understand spreadsheets going wrong, and I get it when there are accounting controls that are missing. We can fix that. But what is happening here culturally? This doesn't sound anything like the experience that I've had with the schools, with extraordinary teachers and school leaders. What is wrong with the process? What can we change structurally to fix it? That's how I'd encourage you to read this report. Instead of blaming people, ask the whys about the structure. And thank you for releasing it so quickly after it's becoming available. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker is Donnell O'Neill.
Hello, everyone. Donnell O'Neill, Senior, Town Meeting Member Precinct 4. I'm also on the advisory committee. I'm here to ask your support for sanitation department. And not to just erase that infrastructure that we have, because when it's gone, we're no longer going to be able to get it back. And we're going to be held over a barrel. I have a question. It's loaded, but I just wanted to be honest with you. Other than DPW Day, have any of you spoken with DPW employees, specifically sanitation department employees? So that's one. I used to work for the DPW, for the sanitation highway department, on the sanitation trucks, and it was probably one of the best jobs I've ever had. It was tough, hard job. They called it a honey truck for a reason, and that was before we had the trucks. There was no trucks to get everything else. The team that we had was close. The early quits was big, and it was motivation for all of us to work as a team to get the route done and complete the route without having to go back for late stops or anything like that. I understand that, that you all trust and appreciate our commissioner of DPW. I do as well, a town administrator, obviously, and Melissa. But I feel that a few steps have been missed, and a review of our sanitation department, instead of taking the crutch away from them, adding that wheelchair to help push it along for about a year, so we can figure out what's really going on with our sanitation department. So the folks that I've spoke with at our DPW, that the people who actually throw the trash and are driving the trucks, want to do the job. The number one issue, and the only really issue, is the early quits were taken from them, and that caused a lot of issues. Now, as it seems from afar and from looking in, it's like a deal was made and it shouldn't have been made. Town meeting didn't approve the DPW budget, and so for us to the support I'm trying to ask for is just to you guys hear us out. Here are the few AC members and town meeting members who've put an amendment out to at least preserve our sanitation department for a little bit longer. People want to work. That's going to happen. It's giving back their early quits. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Richard Murphy.
Evening, Richard Murphy, Precinct 16. Thank you for hearing me tonight. Full disclosure.
Sorry, can you move your mic closer?
Sorry. Full disclosure, my brother Douglas works on sanitation in the highway department. And I'm here to speak for the Liverwitz budget amendment to the Article 9. And I've asked some questions. I've gone out and I've talked to the employees. I've talked to industry experts behind the maintenance of our fleet vehicles, dealerships, rental vehicles. I've talked to management within the town, lower management. And the common denominator is that, and through the questioning that we had during advisory, we were first informed people are not applying for the job. We found differently. Then that statement was corrected and says that we've halted applications because we feel that we're going forward with Casella. In talking to the maintenance aspects of the fleet cars, or the trucks, excuse me, we're only 25% of the way through the usage. Right now, the 4 vehicles average 63,000 miles. Industry experts tell me they easily go over 300,000 miles. That the current maintenance, I was physically at AJ's truck repair in Abington, Massachusetts yesterday, speaking to Andy, who's the owner. And they're working on the Peterbilt 520 right now because it's out of service. And he says, this is normal maintenance. You know, the idea of going to an arm truck compared to going with a throw truck, you think you're going to eliminate labor, the maintenance on when you're throwing 1,000 barrels a day into the truck, you're going to have maintenance. He says, no problem with parts, no problem with maintenance, and this is normal. And again, we're only about 25% of the way through the usage of these vehicles that we own. We know that the cost of the Casella, they're telling us it's going to cost us more. That's going to put a burden on our senior citizens and people in fixed income. Not only the fact that the service that they get from the in-house sanitation people have a personal touch. I've gotten so many stories from senior citizens that they're so thankful and they know their driver by name, whether it's my brother Doug or whether it's Spence Descent, that they get out of their truck and help their senior citizens get the barrels back up their driveway because they know they need the help, because they know the neighbors, they know the residents. There's that personal touch that they have that you're going to lose with Casella. So not only that, and
Thank you. That concludes your time.
okay. Thank you for hearing me.
That concludes the individuals who signed up in advance of the meeting. If there's anyone online who wishes to speak during public comment at this time, please raise your hand using the raise the hand feature. Or if in the room, please make your presence known at this time. It looks like no one else is indicating their desire to speak.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on to our miscellaneous calendar.
Excuse me. How much
Oh, I'm
time is
sorry.
left for public comment?
You only get one public comment.
That's it? Okay.
Sorry.
No two bites at the apple. on the-
No, sorry.
What's the town meeting?
Okay, I'd like to take items 3A through 3L in omnibus fashion, but after we hear from the town administrator on the items that John Van Scoyac mentioned earlier, 3G, H, and K.
I'm actually pleased to say that on 3G, sorry, you mean H, H being the transportation and mobility contracts, K being Schick Park, and L being Amory Playground. Are those the three?
Are the three that John was concerned
Yes, so
about?
those three.
Okay.
So I have here from DPW, Dan Murphy.
Oh, I apologize. My numbering or lettering here.
No, that's
is
okay.
Out of whack, so.
Dan Murphy from DPW is here on the question of transportation and mobility. And online, Meili Pradhan is here on the two park projects, the park and the playground projects. I want to let them speak on these.
Okay, great. Very good. I'm Dan Murphy, Director of Transportation Engineering. Happy to be here tonight to just discuss contract 2416. It was in progress when I got here about a year ago, going through design. It's been a long desired project. It was one that the process used to be that we looked for complete as-is streets that didn't have any national grid gas work. And so it went through design, but it was held up a little bit because we had some water services work we had to do, which is completed. So we've bid it. We received 4 bids. Richard D'Ambrosio, F. D'Ambrosio was the low bidder. And the bids were 1.4 million ranging to 1.8. The streets, I'll say that it's Russet is primarily most of the work. They've been waiting a long time. I know that's been a long requested road for improvements. And then South Tully and Heath are about 40% of the work. So happy to be hearing a request that you award this contract. Okay, any questions? I'm happy to answer them.
Any questions? Okay.
John, I do have one,
Okay.
it's probably it's for anybody. So there's a list of all the roads that are due and scheduled, right?
Yep.
In some sequence order. Where is that located?
Where are these streets located? Where's the?
No. Where's the list? Where's the list published? Is it on the DPW's?
I think we have it. I think we have it up on the site. Yeah.
There's a separate site for the highway improvement program.
Yeah.
Yep. It's a pavement maintenance and preservation plan. We
Right.
have the full list.
The whole list is
You
there.
can go look and you can look up your street.
Okay, because I know everybody wants to know when their streets.
Of
gonna be
course,
fixed.
of
Yeah,
course.
okay. All right, thank you.
Would you be able to send a link to that list to the
Oh,
select board?
I certainly will.
Thank you.
Certainly will.
And then you have
Okay,
Meili is
you.
on.
Great. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Meili Pradhan, Director of Parks and Open Space, and I'm here to speak about Schick Park and Amory Playground. So I just want to start by saying that for both Schick Park and Amory Playground, in partnership with Parks and Open Space Division, the Parks and Recreation Commission conducted a thorough and impressive design review process to work with our neighbors, stakeholders, and park visitors for making for a really robust community engagement process to inform our final design. And the resulting improvements respond directly to the needs and priorities expressed by the park users. And for both projects, there were 3 design review meetings conducted, which is open to the public. So I'm going to dive into a little bit about Schick Park. So Schick, as we all know, is a very well-loved neighborhood park in North Brookline, and that provides valuable recreational opportunities for families, children, and residents of all ages. And many of the existing park elements have reached the end of their useful life and are due for significant upgrades to improve safety, accessibility, and the programming. And the scope of this work under this contract will include improvements of circulation to ensure ADA compliance, new playground for all ages, basketball court, new site furnishings and amenities, and restoration of the existing walls and adding additional trees and planting to enhance the landscape and environmental value. So upon the approval from the board, the construction will kick off early summer and the park will be closed during construction. We had one bidder for the project, Mountain View, as you can see, so we are looking for your approval on this. And moving on to Amory Playground, which is yet another well-loved, multi-user and multi-generational park. The existing facilities at the park, similar to Schick, is kind of really at the end of their useful life and are in need of urgent renovation. It includes, complete replacement of 6 tennis courts, the parking lot, improvement of the boardwalks, railings, and overlooks that are within the Hallspawn Sanctuary. There will be upgrades in drainage and in irrigation, and again, improvement in circulation and making sure that there is universal accessibility throughout the park. There will also be infrastructure needs, upgrades addressed for drainage and irrigation, and really all these improvements will help enhance the ecological value of the Amory Playground and Hallspawn Sanctuary. So upon your approval, the construction will, similar to Schick, start early summer. Amory Field, however, most of the park will be closed during construction, but we're aiming for the ball field to be open during construction. So as a landscape architect, I'm just thrilled to be working with our talented team at the DPW and the consultants to really oversee this construction of 2 high-quality public spaces that is reflective of our community's needs and voices. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the select board? David?
I believe in the context of Schick Park, you mentioned that there was only one bid. Is that typical to only have one bid? And if so, why so few?
Typically, it might not be typical, but in this case, I am not entirely sure in the reason. Because for Amory, we did get 3 bids, ranging from 2.1 million to 2.8. And this is also the prime construction season, and I'm guessing that might be one of the reasons why we received only one bid. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you both.
Okay, any further discussion on those items? Chaz, were you saying something?
No, I just wanted to thank both.
Okay. Yes, thank you. Okay, so let's move on. I move approval of actually we have minutes and it's not in, we have minutes first. I'd like to move approval of the minutes for May 13, 2025. Any edits or corrections to the minutes? I did make one correction, yeah. And that correction was to list the votes that each of the individual Brookline Housing Authority candidates received. The individual select board members who voted for them. I think that's important part of the public record.
Michael also had a revision.
Okay.
Yeah, there was just one correction that Chaz Carey's participation in an event was listed in the past when it was actually happening the next day.
Okay.
So we had amended the minutes accordingly.
Right. Okay, great. With that, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye. John Van Scoyac.
Aye.
Paul Warren.
Aye.
David Perlman.
Aye.
And Michael Michael
Rubenstein.
Okay, I'll have a block here. Michael.
Aye.
Okay, Michael Rubenstein. It's never mind. Okay, next, let's take items 3B through 3L in omnibus fashion. Now that we've discussed the 3 items that were pulled out, All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. John Van Scoyac,
Aye.
Paul Warren,
Aye.
David Croman,
Aye.
Michael Rubenstein.
Aye.
And Chair votes aye. And also chair votes aye for the minutes. Okay. Okay, moving on to our regular calendar, CDBG public hearing. Public hearing on fiscal year 2026 to 35, 5-year consolidated plan. 26 to 35, that's 9 years. So maybe someone can explain that to me. And question of approving, various documents that related to the consolidated plan. So,
Hi, good night. This is David Guzman, Community Development Administrator, along with Director of Community Planning and Housing, Linda Smith. So we are here tonight to talk about the CDBG submission of the fiscal year 2026. And then after following 30-day public comment period, we have received officially allocation from HUD, which is 1,368,250 for the different CDBG eligibilities for the next fiscal year. So we are respectfully requesting the Select Board to take the following votes. The first one is to approve the submission of the fiscal year 2026 CDBG Annual Action Plan to the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development. Vote number 2 is authorize the chair to execute the application for federal assistance as the SF 424 and other certifications required for submission of the annual action plan. And the vote number 3 is authorize the Director of Planning and Community Development to execute environmental reviews or other programmatic documents required for federally funded projects on behalf of the town. So in terms of the official allocation of 1,368,250, so we received the final allocation and it's approximately 1% less than the estimate that we have been using in our recent meetings. So a reduction is in the figure of 13,000. And then to ensure compliance with all federal requirements, we have made a few minor adjustments to the proposed funding allocations. So the first one is to the public service cap adjustment. In order to remain under the 15% cap, so the decision has been to reduce by $694 three subrecipients. One is the BHA Resident Services Program, Brooklyn Food Pantry, and Steps to Success. So these programs will now each receive $53,338. So the Council on Aging was already allocated a smaller amount, $45,229, and will not receive any additional reductions from the overall reduction. And then the BHA and 2 Life Communities housing projects for the BHAs has been reduced by 11,118. So now the current allocation is 560,507. And then 2 Life Communities will remain the same, and that amount is 33,700. So that's technically the reductions that we have for the annual allocation. And I also understand we have the public hearing after the 30 days public comment period. So.
well, I'm glad that CDBG didn't get, I use the word chainsawed too badly. And hopefully we'll continue to receive these funds from the federal government because they play such an important role in housing and other programs here in town.
I would say not yet. Right?
Not yet.
We really do have to be cautious with these things. This is one of our biggest federal funds, and David and I want to do such great work managing this process. It's really critical. We're grateful for all the work they do, but we would want to make clear that this is an area, just given HUD's mission, the mission of CDBG more generally, and what it replaced. I mean, CDBG is a Reagan project, right? Ironically,
Nixon actually.
Well, no, Reagan did the block grant, right? Nixon did the initial HUD grants, and then Reagan revised. Am I right?
It's 74.
74. You're right. So Nixon.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm wrong.
I know Nixon.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really critical to so many localities and crucial that we don't lose it. But I worry that, you know, as this administration progresses, that they will try and find ways to come for it. So we just need to be ready.
So the money that is related to this grant is already in our hands.
Yes, that is correct. So the
Wait,
one that
Iguana-
we are
Iguana is-
transpiring some fear is actually the fiscal year 27 allocation, which is being at Congress right now through the bill. Yeah.
Okay. Iguana, you wanted to say something?
Hi, good evening, good evening. My name is Iwana Lindo
Could you
Smith.
pull down the microphone?
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Iwana Lindo Smith. Yes, we're very worried. Some nights I worry about it because most of my folks are paid from this grant and we're not sure what's going on. Right now it is cut from the president's budget. So hopefully they'll be putting something back in later because they're all negotiating and, you know, wrangling up there to get us some money. So we're pretty much okay for 26, this fiscal year coming up. But as we know, things can get a little shaky. So we're just hoping that we don't get anything like in February where, oh, no more grants are going out or any of that sort of talk. So at this point, we're saying, yes, we're good for a little while, but you know, we can't literally sit down. We have to be halfway down. And that's how it is. We're just kind of trying to figure out, you know, how we'll get around all this, but it's a possibility that next year we may get less funding or we may not get any. And when it gets less there's only 20% for administration that gets, you know, so that's lowered. 15% that gets lowered with lower funding. So we're just hoping that we have an association that we're a member of, the National Community Development Association. They're one of our lobbying folks. They're up in Washington trying to, with other organizations, trying to say, hey, we need this money. We need this money. It goes to, you know, right into the cities and towns. It's not something that's, you know, you have to be doing a lot of hoops to get. It's goes right there to the folks that need it. And so we're hoping that we continue to be funded.
Let me just make sure I'm clear. So the actual money itself will be given to us at the beginning of the 26th federal fiscal year in October 1st.
What happens is after this, we're going to send this application in. They will then review it. And if it meets, it was our job to make sure that it meets the standards, what they were expecting, all the rules. So we have done that. But we're sending it in and they will then review it and will decide, yep, check mark, they're good. So what they then do is there's a federal system that they put the money there. And every time we're on a reimbursable rotation. So what happens is when we spend, we then go in the system and we draw this money down. Right. So they always owe us pretty much because we have to pay folks and so forth. So that's how we get it. But it sits there. We don't actually, it's not shifted to the town's account. Yeah. We don't touch it unless we spend it, we get it. If we don't spend it, it still sits with them.
Yeah, and Chaz was right. We have to be very, very hesitant to celebrate because all they've done is given us a promise of money, and
yes,
actual nickels and dimes will come later.
Exactly.
Mike?
So can you give us a sense of how much money we actually float to these organizations before we get reimbursed? That if the funding, for example, got cut at that point, that we would be on the hook for?
Okay, what happens, it depends on, they will send us a billing, because what happens, the program's running, they'll be paying for whatever it is that they'd asked us for. And so they'll keep paying. And whenever they send us that billing, then shortly thereafter, we'll go in and draw the funds. And when I say draw the funds, we put it into the federal system and then they transfer, when they say, okay, they transfer it to our account because we have to have a separate account from all the other accounts that the town has. And then the money gets transferred into the town. So it's not like, they spend the money first and they know this
Right.
because they're told it's on a reimbursable system.
Everybody's reimbursed.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't give any money up front at all. I don't know of
Except
any.
I would assume that our employees, we're paying our employees and then we go for reimbursement. So that is
Exactly.
the float.
Yes,
Right. It's the labor is the float.
yes.
Okay.
Okay, this is a public hearing. Tiffany, you want to open up the public hearing?
Now that the chair has opened the public hearing, there is no one who signed up in advance for this public hearing on the 5-year consolidated plan and annual action plan. But if there's anyone online who wishes to speak to this item, please raise your hand using the raise the hand feature. Or if in the room, please make your presence known. Okay, there are about 5 individuals in the room, 15 online, and no one is indicating their desire to speak.
Okay, then let's close the public hearing. And any further questions from the select board? Anything else you want to say, Ioana? I'm sorry.
I
Mike.
just have one question. I noticed that the Brookline Center for Community Mental Health was zeroed out. And I'm just wondering whether, what the impact of that will be on their overall operations, if you know?
They do know, whomever is applying, they do know it at the time that they're applying. It's not a guarantee that they'll get the funds.
Right.
So when they're doing their budget, we tell them when after the advisor board has made that decision, we do send them a notification that they wouldn't be funded. That particular program, the board wasn't sure what exactly they were trying to do. So it wasn't something that we could attach a national objective to, and that's one of the criterias that HUD requires. So it was hard to fund them. So hopefully this year we're going to be working with them to try to get them into something that we can actually fund. In any case, the $205,000, that's it. If we have 50 public services, that's all the money we have to split among all 50. There's so what would happen is the others would get less.
Thank you.
I would just add there that the Brookline Center, the health department has an ongoing partnership with them as well. So we're committed, partners with them and providing their services. And just in this instance, even if in this instance we weren't able to give them this money, we still have a pretty strong connection with them, and they provide such a vital service for the community.
And one quick note, we have funded them over the years, though. It's just this year, and I think there was one other year we didn't because it just wasn't fitting quite into the rules. But we have been funding them for many years also.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, unless there's any more discussion, I'd like to move approval of the 3 items that we've been asked to vote on. First, I move approval of the fiscal year 2026 CDBG Annual Action Plan to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. John Van Scoyac.
Aye.
Michael Sandman. I'm sorry. Paul Warren.
Aye.
What's going on today? I'm sorry. David Perlman.
Aye.
Michael Rubenstein.
Aye.
And Chair votes aye. Next, I move approval of authorizing the chair to execute the application for federal assistance, which is Form SF 424, and other certifications required for submission of the annual action plan. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. John Van Scoyac.
Aye.
Paul Warren.
Aye.
David Perlman.
Aye.
Michael Rubenstein.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Finally, I move approval of authorizing the director of the Planning and Community Development Department to execute the environmental review or other programmatic documents required for federally funded programs on behalf of the town. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. John Van Scoyac.
Aye.
Paul Warren.
Aye.
David Perlman.
Aye.
Michael Rubenstein.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Most
Thank you.
appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank
both.
you.
And one quick thing, if you have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out to David and myself. We're happy to help you understand and know what's going on.
Yeah,
And
thank
thanks
you.
again.
Great.
Okay, what was on the agenda previously, Mission Ma Inc., has been deferred to a later date or put off to a later date. Next, fire stations 1 and 4, renovation of the 2 fire stations. And I see Fire Chief Sullivan and Yap Land are whatever it is you do, you'll have is here.
Good evening, John Sullivan, Fire Chief Emergency Management Director. And as you noted, we have with us tonight Lapian from the Buildings Department, as well as Stephanie Greenfield, our design and architectural consultant. And we're really pleased to be able to be here tonight after a long haul here to get here to ask approval for the contract with our construction bid winner so that we may begin in earnest the renovations to stations 4 and then station 1 at the village. And I'll let Lap run you through the slideshow here.
Lapian, Building Department. I know this is a very important project to the town. This is the first really big attempt at electrifying these buildings, which are pretty old. I mean, they're historical in nature. We didn't do anything on the outside. I'd like to introduce Stephanie Greenfield. She is a Brookline native, as well as a principal in the architectural firm Cambridge 7. She's way more qualified to explain design, even though I am a registered architect. I gave that design for her. So we all, Stephanie, please introduce yourself and speak.
Thank you. I'm Stephanie Greenfield. I'm a principal at Cambridge 7. This is a joyful project. There's been really great vision from the chief and from Lap and from Dan Bennett and from Charlie Simmons. So it's been a joy as a vendor to work with the town. I just want to walk you guys through what we're doing in this project. And I really wanted to make sure it was clear what the chief's vision for these stations has been. And this really is the ticket to the show here. These 2 projects are going to start to create a roadmap for future renovations to the stations coming ahead. They are going to set the standards for these future facilities and really promoting camaraderie and community. The chief really worked hard with the design team to find a way to make a real community-centric company in each building. And that's through the use of design and through the way we've designed the bunk rooms. And the second piece is creating equity and gender equity and safe and healthy work environment. So currently these stations have been designed for men only. The project now will allow for changing facilities for all genders in a private way. So there's private bathrooms that are going to be provided in these buildings, and then a communal bunk room, and that's going to promote the camaraderie. The other piece is just to really upgrade these buildings to create a safe and healthy environment. Currently, the decon areas and the living areas, air is migrating from all over the place. There's no controls of hot and cold zones in these buildings. So we really have to get this right. And finally, we're just preserving your historic buildings and bringing them up to net zero energy
And
facilities.
just to be clear, decon is decontamination. Okay.
Facility and what I was trying to say was that the apparatus bay, and you can see it in these images here, there's just a lot of deferred maintenance that's happening on the interior of the building. And the project really started as a mechanical project. But what we're learning is that both architecturally and mechanically, they have to work together. So if you look at some of these images, we have apparatus bays and no sealant between the apparatus bays, the day rooms, and the sleeping quarters. And that's really just not a healthy way for a modern fire station to work. So we're really going to upgrade and make these buildings good for the next 50 years. This is Fire Station 4. And then I'm going to show you a little bit now. And I don't know if you guys have been over there, but it would be fun to see it now and then to see the renovations happening. What we're doing, and these are sketches showing how the apparatus bay is going to work and how we're going to create really clear lockering facilities, decontamination facilities. So everyone has a safe and healthy way to change and redress and then move into the living quarters after a fire event. The next slide shows really great communal living spaces. And again, this is the chief's vision to build community by not having private TV sets and work areas in private rooms, but to really have shared bunk rooms. As you can see in this final image on the bottom, it would be a shared bunk room where everyone can sleep. But then the community spaces is where people are going to get together, dine together, bring their families in.
Do you want to wait till you get through your presentation for questions, or?
Go ahead.
Okay.
I'm just curious about the image. So I know that locker room access for men and women, the availability of that type of stuff. How is that? I see there's a shared bunk room, which I assume is non-gender specific. But where's the lockers? How's that going to work?
So the locker room is going to be just that. And in most fire stations today that are singular gendered, built, the locker room is both a place where you change and you store your clothing. So with the design of the bathrooms that are going to be non-gender specific, the firefighters will simply store their clothes and their toiletries and everything in the locker room. And then when they need to change, they'll bring those with them into the bathroom facilities and change in those individual stalls. So
It's a communal locker room.
Correct.
And then it's individual private baths.
With
for
a
bath-
changing area
yeah,
in the
changing area.
bathroom.
Perfect.
And the bunk rooms are built with dividers that are high enough for privacy, but also have that community space as well. So it's there's a lot of thought that goes into this in terms of making sure that we're addressing the needs of all of our firefighters, no matter what their gender, their race, all of those things are incorporated into this design, as well as that sense of belonging and getting the community back into the fire stations.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and I assume that firefighters themselves have been involved in the design process.
Yeah, but we incorporated the local 950 from the very beginning of the process. Patty Kripe, who is the vice president of the local, has been on the design team since the very beginning, and has had the support of all of the members of the local as well. So that was an important piece for us from the very beginning to make sure that we had buy-in from those folks as well.
We'll just show you a couple renderings here. On the upper left is always the before, and then on the right is the after. So it's Station 1. We're trying to create a new area for the patrol area. These currently you can see the lockering. This is for turnout gears actually happening in the apparatus bay. That's the image on the upper left. In the new design, there will be an entire room that's controlled for the apparatus gear, so it won't be in the bay.
Does it have a separate ventilation system and all that? Is that?
Just another way to control kind of the environmental issues and the environmental hazards that are happening right now, everything's in the apparatus bay, and we're really trying to just keep the vehicles there and keep everything else separated.
Okay.
This is an image of the day room. It's a beautiful historic space on the upper left, and we're really trying to, again, promote, the company eating together and enjoying their own company together. And then this is the bunk room that the chief was talking about, where currently we have separate rooms or we have sort of no real dividers between beds. And this is a nice way to kind of keep even the lighting down low in here. So it's really a sleeping environment, not a hangout place. It's a place meant just to sleep. And finally, just a couple slides on the all electric systems. And this is going to be a pretty sophisticated system of all new mechanical, electrical, fire protection, sprinklered building. What LAP asked me to talk about tonight was just what does it mean to make an all electric historic building today? And the three takeaways really are the transformer size, the generator size, and the systems inside the building are actually smaller. There's more condensate lines, but there's less duct work. And so what you're seeing here in pink is basically a new generator outside the building. But those are the big takeaways on historic buildings and how we upgrade them today. to make them all electric.
I have one more, can I ask one more question before you go? Outdoor space, which I assume our firefighters don't
Station
wanna
one,
be
we have
indoor
none.
all the time.
Basically, at Station One, we really don't have any outdoor space to speak of. The sidewalks in and around the station
Yeah.
are about it.
Yeah.
Just the nature of where it is and how it's
You guys have a
situated.
place to grill though, or is there?
There is a place to grill on the side. It's very limited,
Yeah.
and where the generator is going is where it is now. So we'll have to figure something out for that. But Station 4 has a lot of outside space. So it just depends on where you're at, where that is. So it is a function of just where these things are located. Station 7 up the street here on Washington Street is smack dab between two buildings on either side. There's just no real outside area other than the apron, and so it just depends.
Okay.
So I just want to reiterate that the separation between the turnout gear and the Bay Area. It's firemen have studies have shown firemen have like 2 or 3 times, chief, I don't know exactly how that, the respiratory disease as well as cancer. A lot of it's due to them coming back and just throwing out their gear on the floor, and the fumes emanating off the fire trucks and off their gear goes up into the living areas, and that's a hazard. And as someone who experienced the burn pits in Iraq and Afghanistan, I can tell you it's definitely not a fun thing to have to smell those things. So that's the reason why it's important to seal off the spaces here. Okay, just want to reiterate then.
David?
I have a question about the generator. So it says that
Hmm.
when it's at full load, it's 48 hours. Is that essentially industry standard for a fire station?
I believe it is. It has a sizable belly tank, which can feed. But I think what happens is they call for refills as they need to.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to run you through the bidding of it. As we were very concerned about the general contractor who would do this work, because it is a historical building. You don't want some guy who doesn't have a lot of experience doing historic buildings and fire stations. We went through what's called for a request for qualification process to qualify general contractors on this project. We put it out in the public RFQ. We got approximately 8 or 9 general contractors submitting a RFQ form to me. I went through it, organized it, gave a point system such, and we qualified 4 contractors because we wanted to limit it to 4 so that we felt we would get the best interest if we have only 4 contractors instead of like 10,000 people bidding on it. So the 4 up there were the selected to actually go to the next phase, which is the RFP process, request for proposal process. In what point we worked with Cambridge 7. We sent them the drawings and the specs. We set up RFI process, request for information if they have any questions. Very formal process for the RFP process. All open. There was what's filed sub bids, subcontractors over a certain threshold, $25,000 over the estimated cost. They were allowed to publicly submit bids on this too. And then finally, we got general contractor bids. And as you can see over there, Track Builders was the low bidder, low base builder. We put in 3 alternates in there. One alternate was to, instead of reusing 22 turnout lockers, which you saw, those are the red lockers in the pictures. We have several 22 that were very serviceable, but we wanted to see what the price was if we placed those 22 with brand new lockers that were going to match exactly. And I see it was very kind of costly. We decided not to take that first alternate. The second alternate was, as you remember, the generator. We provided a screen wall around the generator. It is not exactly an acoustical screen wall, but it does hide the noise, abate the noise a little bit. We decided to take that one because it's a busy street. It would give it a little more visual appeal, and so pretty well designed screen wall too. So it wasn't like we're just going to put wire fence on there and hide it with some scrim. Very decorative scrim. The last one was we're gonna put a rail guard on Fire Station 4. Not a code requirement, but it would be a nice to have, and we decided not to take that. So with that said, the column, second to the last column is the numbers with the base bid plus all the alternates added together. As you can see, Track Builders was still the lowest one, even with all the alternates added together. The last column is what we recommend, which is $13,549,097.8. That's the base bid of $13,490 plus the alternate number 2 of $69,978 for a grand total of what we're asking the board to approve is a $13,549,978 contract to Track Builders. Yes, sir.
Paul.
Lap, thanks. What is the contingency that's built in?
I have included in my budget, a 10% contingency off that, so it's approximately $1.35 million contingency just in case.
So the construction cost is 1.1? I mean, so would I take the 13 million minus the 10%? Is the contingency built into this?
This is a lump sum number. This is there is no contingency built into the general contractor's cost.
Okay, so I'm confused. So so your 10% contingency, which would take it to, add 1.3 million to it, right? Or 1.4. Is that the total potential cost of the project? Or is this the total cost?
That could be a potential cost. At this point, we're counting that the drawings were excellent. That there will be no
I'm
extras.
really confused.
So the entire fire station project more generally has money available in it that can be used for these purposes. So what he's saying is the contingency is not built into this contract.
Shouldn't it be?
It's in the overall construction. It's in the overall fire station project, right? So it's available to us. And I think our architect can kind of jump in here a little bit more to.
Go ahead, sir. I mean, yeah. Go ahead, sir.
Well, I was just going to say, what you're seeing on the screen right now are the construction costs. This is just the hard bid costs from the contractor. The town has a contingency built in to the $65 million agreed town meeting vote, but that's not what we're presenting today. What we're presenting today is just the construction cost, and LAP is just trying to explain the process of putting the drawings out to bid and what the bid results have been. So is that fair?
So are there other costs, management costs? I mean, what?
That has been all been, Cambridge 7 has their costs. It was $1.8 million right at this point for the design fees. There's eventually going to be some.
Yeah, speak into the microphone, Lap.
I'm sorry. There's eventually going to be some commissioning costs. We're going to have to hire a commissioning agent to manage this thing, the commissioning of it. There's going to be some testing costs, there's some concrete work in there. We're going to have to hire a testing agency to make sure the brake tests are right. So what we're asking you tonight is just to vote and approve the $13,549,978 for contract for Track Builders.
Great. David, please.
I have a question regarding, are there any challenges presented by going with an out-of-state company in terms of distance, additional costs there, any regulatory complications?
There is it's not really I have no concerns about, because they will have a team on site in the building itself managing it. They will have a construction supervisor's license holder who is licensed in the state of Massachusetts, who's going to apply for the permit and be responsible for the job.
Michael?
So I just want to follow up on Paul's question. So if this is just for the construction costs, then are we to understand that you're going to be coming back to the select board for approval for those other costs related to these two fire stations?
So this is for fire stations 1 and 4. We haven't really gotten into The short answer is yes, eventually, but that hasn't been designed yet. And I think there's a further conversation with that.
I think I can address that. So the contingency costs, the OPM costs, those other costs, yes, we would have to come back for approval for those additionally. It is all within the scope of the appropriation that town meeting made in order to be able to do these projects. It's just not embedded into the construction costs. So those things would be additional to that for Station 1 and 4. We haven't even began to discuss the other stations yet.
Right.
But just for context, and I can give you a little context here, it might help out. So originally in 2022, the estimates for Fire Station 1 and Fire Station 4 came in at approximately 18.5 million. Once Cambridge Stevan did their estimates, the estimates were approximately 15 million. The actual construction cost that came in at 13.5 million. So we're under the original estimates. So
My next question.
we're doing good, as far as that goes. So we've got some contingency built into the original estimates of the 65 million in the first place. So we're approximately 5 million below where the original estimate that was put before the voters was proffered
And-
for that vote. So we're in good shape.
And did that original $18.5 million estimate, was that just for the construction costs or was that the all?
That was
That was the all-in.
That was the all-in. Yes.
Okay.
Got it.
Paul?
Yeah, so thanks, Chief, because that was going to be my question is what was the original thought on what it was going to cost? It would be great as we go forward with this project. It's helpful to see it as an entire portfolio versus just one
Sure.
piece at a time. We've been burned by schools, and so that's why you maybe get some questions like this. So if we can see, when you come back, if we could just see the entire project for all stations, and this is kind of where we're at, this is what the balance is.
Yeah.
It would be really helpful to get
And we can
keep our
give
eye
you-
on the ball.
Yeah, we can give you the original estimates. Obviously, this was always anticipated to be a 5, 7, and now more like a 10-year project because of COVID and other delays. But we always estimated that there was going to be inflationary and there are inflationary costs that were built into the original estimates. No one foresaw the current economic situation. I can tell you in the original warrant article that was written up, not warrant article, but the original, Article 4, the original estimate was 82 million.
Yeah.
That was revised down to 65 million for the authorization vote. Where I've been pretty open and clear about the fact that, the 65 million as we stand when we do the back of the envelope, is like Lap likes to say, costs, with the costs of construction. We're fairly confident at this point. We still will be able to go through 1, 4, 5, and 6, but 7, we may have to come back to the town meeting for an authorization to continue those projects. But
If you've been you've been fully transparent. All I'm saying is that for continuity's sake, because it's hard for us to remember these conversations, we have them
Sure.
so few and far between. Each time
Yeah.
you come, it just would be good to have the 65 million
Yep.
and then show what piece of the 65 million we're
Right.
going to bite off with
Right.
the next ask. That's all.
right now, spoke with Lincoln Heineman, the town finance officer. They just are going out for an authorization for borrowing a 24 additional million. So we had 5 in the bank, so to speak. That was the original borrow. They're going to do 24 more million. That'll take us well through these 2 projects and into Station 5 design. At that point, we'll have a better idea of what the construction costs will be. We're actually moving forward with that. Lop has been, really up against things with all of the projects that he's managing. So the town administrator has approved us to hire an OPM to just do this project so that we can take it off of his plate and have somebody dedicated to this, which means we're going to be able to move forward as opposed to having to wait for LOP to be available. So we'll be able to move forward with the design of Station 5 very quickly on the heels of getting the construction for Station 1 and 4 going,
That's good.
which will then speed the process up as we go along. We had kind of anticipated some breaks in between these projects to give the fire department a little break to settle down. But in my constant consultations with local 950, they want to move.
Yeah,
And
they've got
so
some concerns about five.
we're gonna keep
Actually,
moving.
Don't jump in. David?
You mentioned how gender equity is a part of the design
Yep.
for stations 1 and 4, and that can be used
All
as a
stations.
template for all stations.
All stations.
Is a training facility going to be a part of this project? My understanding is a training facility has some gender equity issues.
No, it isn't. The training facility isn't part of this project, but I'm more than happy to address those issues. I haven't heard a lot of complaints about the training facility. We are no longer doing academies at our training facility. We're sending all of our firefighters to the academy in Stowe and Bridgewater. So I'm not sure that they have there's the same problematic issues there as there was in the past when we were doing our own facilities. The female bathroom down there only had one shower, which was problematic in a way.
Okay.
Let me ask a question about the all-electric building design. With
I'm out.
The design is back in.
Okay.
That's why we brought the team.
Well, you may be able to answer this. I mean, it's not a profound question. But with a diesel generator, are there no electrical generators or, I mean, I know that they're, small homebound ones, but not industrial size?
State code requires us to have a diesel backup generator because you can refill it, who knows? If the grid craps out on us, all power to, you only have X amount of time before the battery runs out on a backup.
Okay.
So it is required by code.
We'd have to take the entire parking lot to the left of Station 1 for a battery bank to make that work. So, yeah, it's unfortunate, but the amount of times that we would have to use a generator in terms of, the affects the environment based on what we're using today for fossil fuels for everyday use versus what we would necessarily, it's an unavoidable context. That's all.
It's an issue that people will ask about, so.
Sure.
And yet, John?
Couple of questions. This is a real basic one. And it's just a background question. How many women do we have in the department? at
With
this point?
5.
5 women at this
Yes.
point? And has the trend been, the number's been growing, shrinking?
Yeah, we would love to continue to have it. I mean, we are still in the civil service process, so we get the list as we get it. We did have one female who was in the process of being hired in this last batch of firefighters, and that candidate unfortunately had to drop out. Hopefully that their situation alleviates and they're back in for the next time around. But at this
Right.
point, unfortunately, we weren't able to move forward with that candidate.
Well, and hopefully this will make Brookline an even more attractive
Absolutely.
draw for,
And that's
firefighters.
part of the entire, process
Good.
of this.
Good. And then the transformer, that had to be added, right, for this project to go forward?
Correct.
And yeah, and did that present complications? Are there special requirements that that has to be housed, screened, whatever?
There's no code requirement for it to be screened or housed. It's an outdoor transformer. It's going to produce heat. So you want it to actually be outside so that, the heat dissipates well.
Yeah. And we're getting the cooperation we need from, what is it, Eversource?
Source,
Yeah.
They actually put in their bill to upgrade the service there. So yes, they're cooperating with us.
Okay, great,
Good.
great.
Michael?
I'm wondering if you can speak to the impact of the historical preservation of the spaces in terms of the cost, the overall cost of the project.
We're not doing much to the outside. In fact, I don't think we're doing anything to. Fortunately, the town of Brookline has invested in maintaining their buildings. And the exterior looks very pristine. Those of you guys who passed by, the pointing's been done. Charlie's done a great job maintaining those buildings. The only exterior work is we're replacing one door on Fire Station 1, which I don't know why it was ever there. I think it was back in the days when they bunched up hay through,
It was a hayloft.
Yeah.
Taylor. That is no longer weather tight, unfortunately.
and we don't need hay on the second floor anymore. So we're replacing that door with a door that looks similar. So the impact to the historical preservation really was maybe $2,000 to replace that door. Yeah, I mean, do you want?
And the design was it was brought before the historical commission so that they approved it, so.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Then I'd like to move approval. So I move approval of the contract with Track Builders related to Fire Stations 1 and 4 renovations in the amount of $13,549,978. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. John Van Scoyac.
Aye.
Paul Warren.
Aye.
David Perlman.
Aye.
Michael Rubenstein.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Thank you.
There was a request for the board, from someone from the board, who was interested in looking at the Somerville Fire Station, which is also going through the process of electrification. Fortunately, Cambridge 7 is also the architect, and we've done a few slides if you guys are interested in. If not, we can skip it.
How long will it take? A couple of minutes?
4 minutes.
Yeah. Let's see if Cambridge, if Somerville's is as beautiful as our Station 1.
It's different.
Well, after seeing it, you may want to revote, Bernard, so.
No, you got my vote.
There's electrification of getting rid of fossil fuel free.
So it's cheaper.
It's not cheap.
Yeah, this is a really interesting project where the city of Somerville partnered with Biomed Realty at Assembly Row, and they were building a 9-story parking garage. And city of Somerville said, can we be a tenant in the base of your building? And so the space at the bottom of the parking garage is leased to the city of Somerville. I think it's a 99-year lease for a new fire station. And it's quite different, actually. In the culture of this company versus what the chief is doing here in Brookline. But this company wanted all private sleeping rooms. They wanted a fitness room, and they wanted a day room, but they also introduced an auxiliary space to train future firefighters. So that's kind of the difference. Other than that, most of the major components are the same. We're really trying to a modern day fire station really needs a hot and cold zone. So that's really what's been much easier in a new construction, a new building, to reinforce that real separation of contaminants between these work zones and sleep zones. So that's really what you're seeing in Somerville. And they really wanted to activate the street edge here. This is kind of a brand new campus at Assembly Row. So the fire station actually is front and center for the community who's walking by, seeing in, and that was all part of the design to create really big glassy areas so everyone's well aware of what's going on in this building. These are some images of their day room on the upper left, of their auxiliary room on the lower right. They're going to have a boat in the building, actually, to take out on Mystic River. And then the sleeping room, again, was a private room for all 4 firefighters who were in this building. So it's a much smaller station.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. I hope that satisfies whoever asked
Well,
for.
there's an idea, Bernard. We could, a fire station underneath a parking deck and at the Center Street parking lot.
That is an idea that I hope someone is going to look at. I'm not sure it's feasible for us, but who knows?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Questions or?
No. We'll call you. Okay, next, Boards and Commissions Handbook. Tiffany, please lead us in this discussion.
Yes, Tiffany Oliva, Assistant Town Administrator for Operations. Before,
By the way, let me just say that,
Sure.
this is a big project and not complex, but I mean, there's a lot of aspects to it that we really need to make sure we get right. So we're not going to vote today. I want people to sort of digest, get comments from the community. I'm sure we'll get them. And, at a later time, we'll vote on it, and make whatever changes, are appropriate.
That's exactly what I expected. So
Okay, great.
sounds great. Thank you. So I'm pleased to bring forward this first version of the boards, commissions, committees, and council's handbook. I like to think it's a significant step in our efforts to support our residents, volunteers, and staff who give their time and talents to our town. It's intended to provide a consistent, accessible, and practical guidance for those serving on our boards and commissions. Because they're called so many things, collectively, I call them boards and commissions, and to make it even easier for me, I call them B and Cs. So that's how they're referred in the document. We can refer to them in another way if need be. And this was really a project or idea sparked early in my tenure, which today is my 1-year mark with the town.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm
I know it feels like I've been here a while. But the chair and I had spoken about creating a more central location and building in some pieces to this. So that's where the idea of a handbook evolved. So again, just recognizing the essential role of boards and commissions, we thought it would really be a foundational tool for ensuring that everyone that participates in our public processes understand expectations, responsibilities, and legal frameworks within which they operate. Importantly, this handbook, like I just mentioned, consolidates a number of individual policies that have been adopted by the select board over the years on an ad hoc basis. You'll notice in the footnotes of the handbook, we reference several of those policies and when they were adopted. As a part of the development process, we reviewed similar handbooks from other communities with town meeting forms of government. Once I developed the draft version in early March, I circulated it amongst boards and commissions chairs, staff liaisons, town council, and other department and division heads. I'll note that I also shared this with some of the moderators committee chairs and transportation board subcommittees. While the policy wouldn't necessarily apply to their boards, I wanted to early on address any major concerns that they would have with the document, and also incorporate any of the feedback that they also had to share. This also went through a review by the town administrator and deputy town administrator. While this handbook is written primarily for select board appointed boards and commissions, many of its general tenets will apply to other public bodies, such as the open meeting law, conflict of interest requirements, public conduct guidelines, and best practices around meetings. So for those board and commissions that do not currently have their own guiding documents or orientation tools, this could also be a helpful touchstone until such a time that they develop their own. So this will cover orientations and or just a couple of things that the handbook covers without going into great detail is orientation and appointments. So how folks can actually apply to serve on a board and commission, what qualifications the board considers, how interviews and appointments occur, expectations around term lengths, reappointments, resignations, just making sure that people have an understanding from the point that they're interested to the point that they are actually appointed to serve. Roles and responsibilities, trying to distinguish between the different types of board and commissions within the town and who their appointing authority is. Standards of service outlines principles of engagement around teamwork, attendance, participation, and the importance of adhering to policy decisions. It draws from the Massachusetts Municipal Association's Code of Conduct best practices to provide some insight into what consists of respectful discourse and staff volunteer relations. It also covers expectations around training related to public meetings and open meeting law, when meetings must be posted, what constitutes a meeting, the role of public comment in meetings, meeting conduct and structure, advocacy and event co-sponsorship. So a lot of different areas. We really tried to make it inclusive. We incorporated language related to language access, since you all recently approved the language access policy, and also around access in general. So I'm just skipping ahead. That's really all I have to share at a high level. I expect this to be an iterative process. I hope to receive red lines from each of you on what you would like to see in this, and go back and forth to get this to the first published version.
Great. Any discussion, questions? I think it's great.
I just have a comment. I read it and I thought it was fantastic, actually. Nothing jumped out at me. We did get an email, I think, from Neil Waschinsky,
Moderator, yes.
suggesting maybe a change or two and some other collaboration opportunities with maybe advisory.
And I just, Tiffany has done a great job of bringing those folks along. Some of the folks that he suggested, we already reached out to, which is great. So we're going to continue that process, make sure everyone is clear and signed off. But yes, for example, Neil's concern was a concern that's been raised in the past about some of your other policies, which is who do they apply to? And the answer is only to boards and committees you appoint. You don't have any control over a moderators committee. You don't, but it says, this document is for your use. If you find something useful in this document, for example, you want to have a public comment policy, you want to have take some of this, by all means, this is available for you.
Right.
But you are not bound by, any town meeting body is not bound by it.
Although it's persuasive, hopefully.
Um,
Michael.
First of all, I agree that this is an excellent document and I appreciate its creation. One question I have in terms of the applicability here, one of the things that I have recently discovered in my onboarding process is that in addition to the boards and committees that we have, there are also several working groups that do things like review water rates and are formed by certain department heads. And I'm wondering whether those are also covered by this document or there are specific departmental policies within staff that would cover those kinds of bodies.
So there aren't that many of those bodies. For example, the water working group that you're referring to is unique, I would say, in that regard. But in those instances, any body, even a body that is appointed or convened by staff, as long as there are public meetings, I think our position on that would be that these policies should apply to them, which is to say that if you're holding a public hearing, if you're doing any of that, even if you're a working group, we are technically select board appointees as well. And so we feel we'll follow the same rules that the public bodies follow.
But maybe we need to have maybe a section on working groups that are, for example, school building committees usually have working groups of, professionals to go over technical issues and things like that, which have produced some controversy at times. We should give some guidance as to how those should be set up and operate.
There's some good language in there that we've taken from the Attorney General's decisions on that, because the Attorney General said to us, listen, if you're going to do working groups, okay, but here are the rules you should follow, and you should not be deciding policy and bringing it back to a broader public group as a fait accompli without having a public process for it. That's what it's, you can't use working groups to circumvent the public process that's supposed to happen. That's the big touchstone that the Attorney General told us. And so we have some specific guidance in there. For example, all right, if you have a working group that's staff, that's talking about things that are going to come back for debate and discussion, that's a working group that doesn't necessarily need to have its work conducted in the public eye. By contrast, take for example, the Expenditures and Revenues Study Committee subgroup that's meeting tomorrow about town school partnership and the town school split. That's a major policy decision. And that group is tasked with making a recommendation to the broader body about what that policy decision is going to be. And in that case, it has multiple members of an established committee, even though it's not a quorum of that committee. We would view the Attorney General's advice there as saying, all right, then that body has to meet publicly. So that's the kind of distinction, the driving line. Are you asking this group to create a policy recommendation that is expected to be adopted by a larger public body? And if so, then those meetings have to be public, whether you call it a working group or a subcommittee.
Okay, I didn't see working groups in here. Maybe I missed it.
It's we're trying actually to avoid that term now because a working group implies that the work of the group is private. So for boards and committees, we want to encourage them to work at the subcommittee level. And if there's a true need for a working group, then we can address that. But we want to follow the Attorney General's guidance on this and make sure that we're not subject to open meeting law claims. So that's why we're being cautious. But we can definitely flag that and put some language in there saying to folks, this is, the reason why subcommittees are so important and why this is so specific in this is because you can't have working groups conducting the public business in private.
Yeah, okay. And also, we make sure that, and of course, I skimmed this fairly quickly, so I may have missed it, but when you set up advisory committees for hiring purposes, I mean, we should be clear on those, just so people understand what we're doing, as opposed to giving guidance as to how it operates.
Yeah. So I think that those are an area where those are not public bodies.
Right.
I know there have been a couple of lawsuits about that, but they're not. There's one pending, but the others, the previous one was dismissed. They're not public bodies.
So I'm thinking that because people think they are,
Yeah.
it may be helpful to just give people some guidance as to what, what we're doing and why we're doing it,
Yeah.
and how we're following the rules laid down.
That's a
by
great
reports and AG.
Great suggestion.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll thank you for this. And if people should provide any comments to Tiffany or suggestions, and we'll take it up at a future meeting. Probably not next week because, it's right before town meeting. We're not going to really have time to have a good discussion. So maybe after town
10th?
meeting. So, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Next, warrant article reviews. Oh, this should be fun. Okay. First, reconsideration of warrant article 2, approval of collective bargaining agreements. I see Melissa is there?
There's nothing on this one. We put it on as a placeholder.
Okay.
Yep, that's all I was going to say. There's nothing, nothing under this one as well. We can just jump right into Article 9 if you're
Yeah.
ready.
Okay.
So for Article 9, you received 2 memos from me. One we had talked about last week that I was still looking to have a conversation with Susan about the last piece of the adjustments that she was making on the school budget. That this was a transfer from the food services revolving fund to support benefits for the employees in that fund. The way that particular item is flowing, it's going to be split $200,000 to the school appropriation, $100,000 to the town. Historically, there has been a transfer, and I think some of the history behind that had been lost. And so Susan and I kind of reconfirmed the way that it should work going forward. And you'll see the recommendation for the school side is to the school appropriation, and then the town side, we are looking to put that money in the police department's budget, in particular under their services grouping. Charlie Young has done a really great job working with the Public Safety Business Office, Liz Scott. And, we really feel that there's a lot of pressure in the services grouping that could provide some relief. So that is why we have the recommendation for the $100,000 for food services. The second memo that you got from me, thanks to Charlie Homer for catching that our newly created health vaccine revolving fund needs annual authorization. It's just a copy and paste of last year's budget motion. So obviously this was a new fund. It wasn't in last year's motion. So looking to add it, and you've got the language in your packet as well. And so those are 2 pieces the advisory committee took and voted on, approved that last night. The third item that's also in your packet related to Article 9 is the amendment filed by Alec Leibovitz and others. That's also in your packet. That was also debated at the advisory committee last night, but the motion on that failed 10 to 11 to 3. So it was very close, but it did fail. And you have the article explanation provided by the moving petitioners as well.
Okay. Any discussion? And can we vote the reconsider and then vote the changes as a group, or do we need to do individually?
So I think the first 2 items on my memos, that officially is the advisory committee's motion. So if you wanted to move the advisory committee motion, that includes all the changes that we've discussed. And then I think separately, you can take a vote on the Leibovitz motion as well.
I'm sorry.
The Leibovitz motion, the amendment.
Oh,
to
Leibovitz,
DPW,
I'm
yeah.
sorry. Okay. Any further discussion on this?
I do would just note that Commissioner Shute is here. I do know, I was online. We've gotten some questions since this amendment has come in, about DPW's operations. And the commissioner is going to send a factual letter to town meeting discussing what has happened, just providing a timeline and summary of events, because that's what's been asked of her. But again, that's all that DPW is doing on this.
Okay. Paul?
Yep, do you want to talk about the motions and then also at the same time, the Leibovitz thing, or you want to have a
Let's
different
do the
separate
Leibovitz
discussion?
thing separately.
Separately, okay.
I mean, I think that makes most sense. Okay, since there's no further discussion, I'd
Nope.
like to move for reconsideration of warrant Article 9, which we previously voted. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. John Van Scoyac.
Aye.
Paul Warren.
Aye.
David Perlman.
Aye.
Michael Rubenstein.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. So now, unless anyone has any further questions, I'd like to move approval of warrant Article 9 as amended by the materials provided to us by Melissa. Any further discussion or description needed? Don't
Be
think
clear,
so.
this is the advisory committee's motion for
Right.
Article 9. Yep.
Okay.
Correct.
All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. John Van Scoyac.
Aye.
Paul Warren.
Aye.
David Perlman.
Aye.
Michael Rubenstein.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Now let's go to the Leibovitz Leibovitz amendment. You want to present that, Melissa? Or no?
Does she look like?
It's not much different from the last time this was debated in front of the advisory committee. The numbers are the same. I think the narrative has changed a little bit. And you have the advisory committee action. They are not moving this particular amendment.
Could someone actually describe specifically what the Leibovitz amendment's doing? It's moving money from, it would be good to just
Cancel
cover the
contract.
details of it. Yeah?
Sure, I can go ahead. So essentially
thank
what
you.
they are doing is reducing the amount that is in the services budget, putting that under personnel, which essentially is looking to restore the positions that were reduced in order to fund the contract. And then they also have a condition of appropriation that would prohibit any movement of those funds. So we couldn't, after town meeting, decide to move the money back down into services and fund the contract. So if you wanted to move money within sanitation, you would need to visit both the select board and the advisory committee. So that's kind of what that condition of appropriation attempts to do.
Had they also recommended making some amounts less than what were before, or is it a one-for-one transfer of money, or as we had spoken briefly about?
So they're moving money around, and what town meeting is not allowed to dictate the operations of a department, right? So what they're doing is they're suggesting the moving of money around from account to account. And then in the article description, they say, this is what we'd like to have done with this ideally, or this is the purpose of this, but they are not attaching it as formal conditions of appropriation because the moderator has said that's out of scope. So what they're suggesting in this is, if this is voted, what they would like the department to do is restore these positions that were cut, hire people, try and hire people back, talk about putting together an incentive pay program or something, restore the early release program that the department tried to restore unsuccessfully, do it again, do it differently. And in the interim for this 1 year period, try and enter into a contract for the same sort of services we have now, which is right now, all of recycling and all of the hauling from the transfer station, that is recycling pickup and recycling hauling plus trash hauling from the transfer station, are done by a contractor. And that 5-year contract is expiring, which was the impetus for this whole conversation in the first place. So what they're saying is renege on the current contract. The current contract won't be funded, so you have to go back to the contractor and say, sorry, we didn't get appropriation, it's out. And then ask them or go out to bid for a contract that provides the same level of service that we're providing now, and continue to keep trash in-house. They have allotted an additional 5% premium for that, because they are acknowledging that it will be difficult for us to win any sort of favorable rate for those costs, given that the contractors will have us at a significant advantage, us at a significant disadvantage.
You mean they're going to be able to hold us over a barrel?
Yes.
Okay. Which was described earlier.
We recommended to them that they put 10% in, and they said that they didn't believe us on that either. So they put in 5%.
So where's the 5% coming from?
It's coming from the
I mean,
savings.
adding money to the
Right. They're reducing money from the contracted services budget, but not so much. And then they're putting some of that, not all of it. They're keeping some of it in there. And they're saying that the reason why they're moving this money around is to have enough money to hopefully procure an emergency contract for 1 year, assuming that we could get that, which is an assumption. But only budgeting a 5% increase in the costs as opposed to the 10% we recommended.
Okay, David.
Given that town meeting cannot dictate how a department runs its department, practically speaking, all this would do is just reduce money DPW would have access to, but it could still proceed with the contract anyway.
We wouldn't have enough money in the budget in order to execute the contract, right? Something would have to give there. And it's by design. We would say we don't have enough money left in the contracted services budget to fulfill this. Theoretically, we could go back to advisory committee because that's the condition of appropriation and say, would you please reconsider? But again, it's the will of town meeting, right? If town meeting says, do this, the town meeting says we're not funding this contract. We're stuck. We are not going to have the ability to fund this contract. And we will do the best we can.
How would we pick up the trash?
Bernard,
I don't know. And that really scares me.
Okay. David, I'm sorry, Paul.
That's okay. Thanks, Bernard. So Chaz, there's a number of things that are included in this, which are incentives, reinstating the early release or whatever they're calling it. Is that collective bargaining?
Yes.
Do we need to go back and then renegotiate with the union?
Yes.
And that collective bargaining then would need to be approved by?
We can impact bargain it. But yeah, the ultimate process would need to be, memorialized in some way and approved, subject to final approval. But we could impact bargain it.
Can you describe the early release that has been mentioned multiple
I think the
times?
commissioner would do a better job describing that program.
I just need to understand what it is.
Good evening.
Commissioner Shute?
Hello.
Sure. Good evening, Erin Shute, Commissioner of Public Works. The early release program started in 1997. It may have been happening informally before that. It was a separate agreement. And with that early release, there was really some recognition of the positions and employees were expected to all work together. And if they finished the routes early, they were able to communicate with the supervisor, they would help each other. Sort of if someone else's route wasn't done, they would work together to complete that route. And then they'd be released early. And I think as you've heard from Donnell and other folks in the past, it was something that was traditionally done, and there was a lot of collaboration and work together historically for that to be successful. And that was also a time when we had a little bit of a different workforce, a different operation, different vehicles. We didn't have toters. There was actually a much larger volume of trash itself. We now have much more diversion, so probably had about 25% more tonnage at that point in time. And early release changed over time, and something that had been collaborative and successful had become a challenge with less collaboration, less cooperation, some problems happening in terms of misstops and employees leaving, and frankly, other divisions needing to come back and do the collection. So what happened is, with early release, the employees could leave early when they worked together, but the deal was that if the work wasn't done, they also all stayed together and finished the work for the town. And what happened over time is that collaboration was no longer successful, the cooperation wasn't successful, and the work wasn't getting done as it was originally intended. So in 2021, early release was eliminated by agreement with the union. It wasn't working for various members of the union, but also for the town overall.
So just to be clear, it was eliminated through agreement with the union through collective bargaining?
No, the side agreement, because it wasn't part of collective bargaining itself. It wasn't part of the main contract. It
Okay.
was a side agreement. And it was a side agreement that was intended to, that the town agreed to and the union agreed to if all parameters in essence were met.
Mhm.
And they weren't being met. And so that was something that was eliminated. And there was a period of time when, some employees were leaving at 11 or 11:30 in the morning, through this early release, and there was still work to be done.
So then we brought it back, though, right? Because when we talked about privatizing services in
Thank
20,
you.
yeah.
So, as we were looking at sanitation, we negotiated with the union for 16 months around, sanitation collection is in crisis. We're going out to bid to renew these other sections of the contract that we currently have, working with Casella, and we're gonna look at this as well, but we want to talk with you about options. And so we did. We met many times, and really the union said, we think it's all about early release. If you could bring back early release, pilot this, I think you're gonna see we can make it successful, you can make it successful, and this is gonna save in-house trash collection. And so we said, let's develop a pilot. Let's see what that looks like. Let's evaluate it. They said, this is going to appeal to all of our internal members. Like, we're going to offer this internally. You're going to fill those spots right away, and we're going to be able to bring it back. And the deal was, we said, okay, so this is 8 employees. So what we don't want is the burden of trash collection being put on other divisions. So if they all work together, 6 of the 8 can leave early by 1 o'clock, no earlier than 1 o'clock every day, but 2 stay so that they can get any missed pickups. And missed pickups can happen because there's utility work, there's a partial road closure, et cetera. But that 2 would stay, 6 would go home. And that would be part of this hybrid early release. So we could make sure that they could do the work, they could work together, they could collaborate, but they would still have that benefit. And then we allowed them, we had some ideas for how they might want to work that day to day or week to week. But then they had some ideas on how they wanted to sort of negotiate that amongst themselves. And we said, that's fine. If that's going to be easier for you and provide the flexibility, then let's do that and let's see how that works. so we started with this, I'll say, and I've said this to advisory and, you know, in many committees where we've talked about this, I really did think this was going to be successful. We put a lot of time into talking about what a successful program would look like, but ultimately it did not work. And, you know, we also said, we will give you 2 additional people from highway every day, up to 2. After that, then this program isn't working. And that was for vacations, holidays, sick time, things like that. But ultimately, when it came to having to stay because the work wasn't done, the team wouldn't stay. And so, you know, early release is about being able to go early if the work is all done, but staying and doing the work together if it isn't. And so, unfortunately, that the pilot failed, and we extended it 2 more times to continue to try to see if they could make it work. And you know, their supervisor was trying to help make it work as well. Their supervisor is a long-term and long-time sanitation employee that had been a lumper, been a driver, and really was trying to help the employees that he was now managing do that successfully. And it didn't work.
Yeah, David.
When you initially presented the Casella contract to us, you mentioned that DPW was having difficulty recruiting people who had interest in working in sanitation. In public comment, we've heard some suggest that the reason for that is applications are no longer being accepted. So can you explain the timing of that?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to actually check with the highway director in terms of, I mean, when we said we couldn't fill those positions, I'm talking about years, right? That we went back to 2019, where we sort of perpetually had at least 1 vacancy out of the 8, and we were always trying to fill that. And then it was growing to 2 during the pandemic, and then it extended a little bit more, and then it was 3 post-pandemic, and continued to grow. So when we said we've had problems filling the positions, it wasn't the past year or 6 months. It's been longer than that. No, the positions were advertised. We did some internal promotions, even post having the contract approved by the select board, because there's a premium pay on the driver position. And so we opened that up, knowing that some internal candidates would be interested, and regardless of what happened with the contract, that you know, that they would be able to stay in that pay group. So we did that. And then as we sort of, I want to say a couple months later, we're no longer trying to fill those slots. We're trying to get to July 1 and have a new contract. So we are not looking for sanitation truck drivers today. You know, we have a contract that we know will provide reliable and sustainable service to the community. And our collection program right now is really on the brink of collapse.
Michael.
Thank you. I'm wondering if you can tell us, you sort of described what the work hours were with the early release program. If you can also, by comparison, describe what the typical work hours are in the absence of the early release program for comparison.
Thank you. So generally, the work hours would be 7 in the morning to what would be 3:30 p.m. The union, through collective bargaining, has negotiated a reduction in its cleanup time and afternoon break that it historically had. So the actual workday is 7 o'clock to 3:05 with a morning break and half an hour lunch.
Cool.
Thank you, Commissioner Shute. So I think you answered, I have three questions. I think you answered one already. The new contract is starting July 1. It's correct?
Correct.
Okay. And that would be sanitation and recycling, correct? Okay. And then what is a fully staffed sanitation and recycling team, or, well, what we currently privatized recycling. What is a fully staffed sanitation? How many FTEs?
So the fully staffed for drivers, like how it's budgeted is 8, but it at least takes another 2 because of vacation, sick, and workers'
So you
comp.
need-
But it's
so you need
staffed for
10.
8 with a supervisor.
So that's 8 plus a supervisor would be 9, plus 2 more for vacations would be 11?
Correct.
Okay, so it's 11. And how many of those employees do you currently have today?
Well, of the 8, we have, so we have a supervisor and 3 of the 8 positions filled. And then any of the other vacancies, the 5 for the daily required and whatever we have to pull over from highway, those are all coming from other divisions right now.
Okay, so just to be clear, putting the coverage for vacations, which are the 2, you're pulling those from another part of DPW. Okay, so you're covering it from other areas. So you need 8 drivers and 1 supervisor. And today you have 3 drivers and 1 supervisor. So you have 50% of the personnel that you would need.
Less
You're
than,
missing 4.
yes.
Yeah, you're missing 4. Okay, and
5, missing 5.
you're missing 5. I'm sorry, you're missing 5. And so if town meeting were to approve this a budget amendment, which is essentially defunding the contract, you would need to go hire 5 people by July 1, or have some contract extension or some emergency contract to get someone to pick up the trash until such time that we could phase in and hire people and get them properly trained. Is that correct?
I think it would either be that or that we're continuing in this mode right now where we're pulling from highway, parks, and water and sewer to collect the trash. And folks may,
Do those employees, is that sustainable? Are those employees wanting to do those?
they do not want to do the work. And what's happening is, we're pulling, and some folks I really have to give these public works employees, both the 3 that are on sanitation and all of the folks that we're pulling from other divisions, a whole lot of credit. They're doing this work, in very tough circumstances. The employees that are going down from other divisions do not want to do the work. And then when the work isn't completed at the end of the workday at 3:05, we are calling and literally have gone through the entire list of employees in some cases to try to get employees to work overtime to help complete the route. And we are not able to fill all the slots. So I'm sure that residents have noticed that trash is getting picked up very late. It could be 7 p.m. or later. Sometimes it's the next day. And yard waste as well has had to wait in many cases so that we can get the trash picked up. So I do know that folks are seeing a decline in the level of service.
And is that, Bernard, may I ask one more question? Is it, when it gets picked up at 7 p.m., is that trash being picked up at overtime costs?
Okay.
It is. And by the way, I was on the route that when the trash didn't get picked up, and I ended up getting picked up later the next day. So that did impact me personally. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I see Donnell O'Neill, who's one of the petitioners for this budget amendment, wants to make a comment. Donnell? Or actually Tiffany's,
Oh, yeah.
and
Let me,
someone else.
yeah, let me try and see if I can do that.
I got it, Chaz. Donnell, I'm
thank
gonna promote you now. Or he's promoted. Thank you, Chaz. He, hold on. I'm actually not able to promote him for some reason.
Hold on.
Okay. Can't do without you, Tiffany.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have the ability to
That's okay, Charlie. I'm back.
co-host.
So, Donnell O'Neill.
All right, it's not.
Donnell, you've been promoted.
Thank you. And apologies, but for some reason my video is not being allowed to get shared. So sorry that you can't see me. Thank you, Bernard, for letting me speak. So I hear Aaron. What it comes down to is the early quits wasn't the same. Added stipulations to the early quits that deterred the employees from actually doing the work. So that needs to be said. Secondly, the Senate employees that we've spoke to want to continue to do the job. We have a transfer station. It's our transfer station, okay? When we do the hauling, right? Casella subcontracts the hauling out. It's not even, so what it comes down to is our DPW workers, right? They're being strained. The sanitation department, the sanitation workers want to actually do the job. If they put back the early quits, have a backup plan like everyone has had for decades, the late drop-offs, it'll work. Employees that want to work, you have a nugget of the town in regards to the station. The whole infrastructure has been set up for years. So if we take it away, we're stuck. We are put over that barrel. Employees want to do the job. This is not. I appreciate Aaron. I knew Aaron before she got the commissioner position. Okay, Kevin Johnson, knew Kevin Johnson. Well, everybody. I used to work for the DPW, for the highway, throwing the trash. It's an important job. There's a lot of people that still want to do it, and for us to just get rid of it and be stuck is crazy. Ann Braga mentioned at one of the AC meetings that even private sanitation pickups, companies, apologies, are having a hard time retaining employees. So why do we think that it's okay to privatize, knowing even the private folks are having a hard time retaining folks? It's a horrible decision. Advisory committee wasn't even notified until the last draw. I feel moving forward that when decisions are made in regards to big decisions in regards to departments losing whole divisions, that the advisory committee, the financial branch, needs to be up to date or cued in. Aaron already apologized for it. You know what I mean? I get it, but it's a huge blow. And nobody from select board has spoken with any of these sanitation workers. None of them. Bobby Allen used to do it all the time. Melissa, you know that. Bobby Allen used to do it all the time. Okay? So it's a bad mistake if we get rid of this. I'm sorry, Aaron. I'm sorry, Chad. I'm sorry, Melissa, that you guys already made this deal. But town meeting did not approve the sanitation department budget. Maybe you guys should discuss this with the advisory and the select board and others who have a stake in this. That is what we're going through an issue, that we're thinking about doing this. But that never happened. So this is the beef. This is the problem. Okay? And I have nothing else to say unless you want me to say more. To speak at town meeting. And thank you for the second bite of the apple.
I do think I appreciate one, Danelle's work for the town and his work in advisory. And Danelle, thank you for always being respectful and engaged in this process. You're a really important voice in this. You know, from on the inside, right, how a lot of the stuff in town operates, and that's really important. And I understand where you're coming from. I understand the history, you know, your, you know, really close attachment to that team. And I have a huge respect for that. You know, I do talk to employees. I talk not just to the sanitation guys, I talk to everybody at DPW. I was just down there at DPW day. I was talking to those guys. I really can't. And let me be clear. There are two. You raised two different issues. One is the process. You're right. There was an issue here where we thought we had brought advisory along, and advisory didn't feel brought along. That is on us. We corrected that as best we could, and we have committed to doing better on that going forward. Advisory plays a vital role in all of this, and I think we all agree that that is something that we understand and are recommitted to. And I've already recommitted that to the chair, the entire body, all of that stuff. But to say there was no public process is untrue, right? The select board was briefed on this. They had discussion, they had two public meetings. They had a number of questions asked. We presented two potential options to the select board, which is the chief executive body of the town. And the select board was given the choice with all the information. Do you want to try and limp along? You want to try and make this work with 5 vacancies and people not wanting to do the work? And we had a guy come in and work only for 5 days and then quit because he didn't want to work sanitation. He wasn't hired to work sanitation. That's not fair to him. And it's not fair to every other staff member who is all of a sudden being asked to do sanitation work. That's not fair. That's not right. So I understand that people feel this deep attachment to this and that they want good, well-paying union jobs. They want the service to stay in-house. They don't want to be in a situation where there's the potential for if we lose an in-house service, we can't get it back. I get that. We took all that into consideration when we presented these options to the select board. We said it to the select board. We made it clear to the select board that, yeah, these are hard choices you have to make sometimes. But at the end of the day, is the trash getting picked up or not? Right now, the answer is no, and it's getting worse. It's getting so much worse, and it will get so much worse. We are the only people who still do this in-house in the metro area, except for Cambridge, who is extremely wealthier than we are, right? So it's, you know, we are.
I'm saying give them a wheelchair, all right? Let's push them. We're supposed to be supporting our divisions, our departments, every department. Give them the wheelchair. Don't just cut them off.
I know.
Sorry.
No, it's all right. I hear you on that. And what I'm saying is, and what you heard Aaron say is, we did that, right? We keep doing that. And I hear you when you say, well, it wasn't good enough, but we did it. We extended it twice. Like, how good does good enough have to be? Like, we bent over backwards to make this work.
Sorry, Bernard, you said this. Bernard,
let's not have a back and forth, Danelle.
So I appreciate that you disagree. And you can make that.
Mute him or something? Like, just stop interrupting, Danelle, please. Stop interrupting.
I appreciate that you disagree with that, and you can make that disagreement known at town meeting. But the people who went to advisory, Aaron, Kevin, John, the whole team, all the way down to the supervisor who was trying to make that system work. Those folks have like more than 50 years of public works experience between them. They tried to make this work. They searched for different solutions. This took years. You heard Aaron say it. We've known this has been coming since 2007. And each time that it was on the block, we worked with the union to try and stave it off. We tried every which way. We did it in 2007. We did it in 2017. We did it in 2019. We did it in 2023. We managed to make it work. And now we're at a breaking point. So the people whose job it is to make this run are telling you that this is where it is. And if you want to disagree with that, that is your prerogative. But I would just take that into consideration.
Yeah, my concern is that at this late date, we are facing the possibility of not having trash picked up this summer. or shortly thereafter. We need to vote on this? Okay. I assumed we did. I was hoping maybe I was wrong. Okay, so,
Bernard, before you vote, I just have one last point. That's it, man. That's it.
one quick last point.
Yes. So with the early quits was not brought back 100%. Okay, there was crazy stipulations with that
Okay.
with the early quits. That's all I'm saying. All
Okay,
right?
got it. Got it.
I would like to say one thing about early, say something about
okay, wait
early
a minute.
quits. Just, no, okay, forget
Okay.
it. Can we move no action?
Okay, you want to move no action?
Yes, I move no action.
Okay, no action on, the budget amendment, submitted by, Alec Leibowitz, Jocelyn Murphy, Danelle Neal, and others.
Richard Murphy.
And Richard Murphy, that's right, he
The
was
Murphy
right
family.
here. Is on the table, for no action. All in favor of no action, please indicate by saying aye. John Van Scoyac,
Aye.
Paul Warren.
Aye.
David Borman.
Aye.
Rich.
Michael
What is the problem with your name?
Who are you?
Michael Rubenstein.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Thank you. I'm sorry. I gotta get used to this. We used to have another Michael, right?
This is what I said this to him last week and it's totally, he was doing fine. And I said, you're gonna call him Michael Sandman.
Right. Okay, next we
I would
have,
just- If I may, for the chair, I just want to thank the select board for your support. We have very much tried to work with and have continued to work with the union. 2 positions will remain in sanitation. And while we wish we weren't in this position, I just need to be able to pick up the trash for this community. So, thank you for supporting us and trying to support this service for the town.
yeah, and we want you to pick up the trash too.
And we appreciate you, all that you do.
Okay, next, we have 2 warrant articles, warrant article 14 and warrant article 15. The main one is 14. 15 refers to the an exemption from demolition delay. But 14 is to create an administrative review process for requests for reasonable accommodation for individuals with disabilities who need to work around our zoning and other regulations here in town. So
There are a lot of
we-
moving parts. I
Pardon me?
can kind of give you a brief summary.
And
of
what we have to do is to reconsider because we voted on this a couple weeks ago. Okay, give.
I would
us a
also just
brief-
note while one of the petitioners for an amendment is in the room,
Right.
David Pollock, one of the petitioners for an amendment is online, Dick Benka. And then you also have John Bukite, who's been working on town council's office on staff online remotely to answer some of the questions about.
As well as Polly Selko from
And Polly
planning.
Selko, thank you, yes.
And
No, I don't know if the original petitioner, Ms. Oates or her counsel are online.
Yeah. And
one
Melissa?
additional item, the select board's current motion is a referral for both 14 and 15 to the select board. You had done that before CTOS had taken their action. CTOS also voted a referral motion. Sean Lynn Jones is here to talk about that. He provided language from CTOS. I think he is encouraging the select board to take the CTOS referral language if you were to stay where you are with referral. And then Chaz kind of outlined everything else where everyone else is. I think that advisory also last night voted for referral, but David, I think, is still advocating for his motion, but he could talk more about that as well.
Okay, Paul?
So I just want to make clear, I want to understand all the different permutations. So there's an original motion from the petitioner. I assume she's still planning on moving that. We have a motion from Pollock, Penzel, and staff, PPS motion. Well, has been moved yet, but there'll be a
Hey,
motion.
Paul,
Yep.
mind if I just interrupt? Because
Yeah.
that bothers me that is being labeled that way. And I know you're just reciting what the
Yeah,
label
I'm
is.
just what the label
Yeah,
is. Yeah.
I'm uncomfortable with this notion that, those 2 sponsors are claiming staff as a co-sponsor when I hear staff work with both sides.
Okay.
And
That's a great
my understanding is we don't actually have a staff motion on this and that referral would sort of maybe produce a staff motion
That's,
eventually. I apologize.
no, that's, no,
Interrupt.
thank you, John, for making that point. I think that is an important point.
Can we get
distinction.
clarification? I mean,
Yep.
John Buchheit, you want to talk a little bit about the work you've been doing with all the groups here?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, so I have been consulting with both of them, although I can represent that staff, which I'll say is our ADA coordinator, Sarah Kaplan, as well as Polly Selko in planning generally, as well as Dan Bennett, do have a preference for the Pollock version, and I've had more of a hand in drafting that. And as a result, we added the staff to the label. So I apologize if it's, yeah, not the standard, but that's what's occurred. But I certainly have consulted with Mr. Benka and looked at his and chatted with him a number of times about it.
I say we don't move. I mean, be clear, we're not moving this. That is uncommon. I think given the situation that I'll let John speak on this issue, right? John, I think the question that I have for you is that ready to go? Is that article ready to go? Do you think it would sustain challenge? Do you think we would need to come back and amend it? Or is it better for us? Is it better for you do you want more time to take a look at this and figure out how to make it work?
Yeah, so let me try and make sure I address all of those. I do think it's ready to go. I think this has been I mean, everybody agrees that we need to memorialize this process, and there's been a lot of work and thought developing these 3 versions. It started with the policy that staff worked on last year. And petitioner's version was introduced, which was a version of a bylaw that was developed by a law firm that does municipal land use work. We took that and trying to address many concerns that were raised about the petitioner's version to develop the PPS version. And not long after that, I think Mr. Benka took the then PPS version and started developing his version. And since that time, actually, we've stolen a lot from him and he's stolen a lot from us. And if you look at the two, I think there are a lot of similarities. Now, there are certainly some differences, but anyways, I think staff believes that a lot of work has gone into this at this point and believes that we're in a position to adopt a version, and we do prefer the PPS version.
Okay, Michael, quickly. Yeah.
I was just going to ask if Paul's could finish his list.
Oh,
because,
Michael.
because there are other things going on just besides the motions.
Yeah. And your list was to ask for a description of the differences.
I just wanted to make sure that I knew what our
Okay,
options
good.
were in
The
front of
other
us.
2 options, okay.
That's all. I know that there's an original petition from Don Oates. There is a version, which is, let's just call it for now, the Pollock version. There's a Benka version, and then there is a referral motion to us.
Okay.
Those are currently the things. And advisory has referred it to us.
I believe advisory has, I'm sorry, yes.
They've referred it to
Yes,
us.
referred it to you.
CTONS has referred it to us. Now, they may have different language, I don't know. And we referred it to us.
Sean Lynn Jones is here from CTOS.
Okay.
Sean has
Okay,
to go.
yeah,
Maybe we
yeah.
get Sean to talk about the referral motions.
Yeah, wait, before we talk
Oh,
about
before that-
referral, what I thought Paul was asking was for Alyssa to sort of give us an outline of the differences between the Don Oates original version and the 2 versions that have come afterwards in terms of the processes set up and how they address the issues that this warrant article is intended to address.
If she's
You
unable
wanna
to
do
do
that,
that, I
Melissa,
can.
or not?
I
John?
would say that
No.
Polly or John would probably be able to
Sure.
talk about the differences.
Sure, I think I can do this pretty succinctly. So, there's the original petition and I guess what I'll call 2 substitute motions. So 3 versions as Select Board Warren just went through. So the petitioners is most protective of the rights of the disabled. There's no notice to the public and no public input. the Pollock version balances the rights of the public with the rights of the disabled, and staff believes it strikes the right balance. It limits the public meeting in the process to one planning board meeting. It confines the decision of whether the accommodation is necessary to the ADA coordinator and the building commissioner. And it concludes with the building commissioner issuing a decision, working with the ADA coordinator, planning staff, and planning board members. And in this version, the building commissioner's decision can be appealed to the ZBA, but is otherwise final. So in the Banca version, I think it's fair to say that it is the most protective of the public. It has 2 public meetings that are required, a planning board and a ZBA meeting. It does allow boards to delve into this question of whether the accommodation is necessary. It does have the building commissioner issuing the reasonable accommodation decision, but that decision must be consistent with the guidance provided by the ZBA. The current Banca version, appeals would go directly to court. I think those are the high points. I don't know, Paula, if you have anything to add.
Well, I just would like to say that the planning board is used to looking at designs and suggesting modifications. And it seems to me that that's the board that's most important here in terms of looking at an accommodation and looking at architectural plans and saying, well, you know, maybe you could do this or you could do that. That would limit some of the impacts to the abutter. So I think that the Pollock Penzel staff version really takes care of the public notice, because then when you do have the planning board meeting, you do give public notice. You do allow the abutters to speak at the meeting and to voice their concerns. And then there's an interactive process where the planning board chair and another architect and any of the different town boards that are involved can meet with the building commissioner and really, and with the applicant, and discuss, you know, try to work things out so that everybody's happy and so that there is no appeal to the Board of Appeals. Yes, in some cases there will be an appeal to the Board of Appeals, but in many cases there may not be. And therefore, it is a much shorter time period, because the planning board does not need 2 weeks' notice to hold a planning board meeting. They do not have to render a decision that has a 20-day appeal period. It's just a much quicker process. And I think the whole idea is to, you know, be sympathetic to the person who needs the accommodation and try to, you know, have a system that's fair to everybody, but that fast tracks the decision.
Okay, we have hands raised. David.
So you just brought up
Back.
the amount of time that it takes to fully exhaust the process before the accommodation would actually be approved or denied. Can you run over what that time frame would be under each of these versions? My main concern is I don't want us to be favoring something that'll be very cumbersome and lead to extremely long delays in an outcome.
Paul, you want me to take a crack at this?
I'll just say with the Board of Appeals that you statutorily are required to have a legal ad in the paper 2 consecutive weeks, at least 2 weeks prior to the Board of Appeals. So of course you have to put the ad in the paper, you know, prior to that. And then once the Board of Appeals renders a decision, the decision has to be written, it has to be reviewed, and that could take a couple of weeks. And then once the decision is filed, there is a statutory timeframe of a 20-day appeal period before a building permit could be issued. Whereas with the planning board, you really only need a week's time to notice neighbors. Once the planning board makes a decision, the very next day, the planner can put this is what we typically do, we put whatever was voted on in a memo to the building commissioner. And then, you know, if everybody's happy with the decision, then a building permit can be issued at that time.
So the building commissioner has up to 60 days under the Pollock Penzel version. And then sometimes that can be stayed depending on whether more information is necessary. But the planning department component would add maybe about a month. Is that about right? So there should be, or even,
Well, I think it could be
within
within
the
the 60 days.
Yeah.
all right, so that's running simultaneous. Okay.
Yes.
John, and then I'd like to see if we can get Dick Benka and David
Sure.
Pollock to sort of outline what their proposals are.
Sure, just to answer the timing
wrap it up.
question. So I think 60 days is correct for the Pollock version. And as well, and there will be times when it's paused, when the town is waiting for information, likely to take a little bit longer. And for the Benka version, I think initially there's 45 days. I think if there's a zoning component, which I think in almost all cases there will be, that's generally what it's for. There's an additional, and Dick can speak to that, but there's additional amount of time for, I think, is it 21 days for the planning board to execute their process. And then after that, it's an additional 30 days for the ZBA to execute their part. So 45 plus 21 plus 30 is approximately a little under 100 days. So.
Okay, why don't we start off with Dick Benka? I see it has his hand up. And
You're gonna give me a chance.
oh, I'm sorry, John.
I'm sorry too. I have just enormous respect for every single individual, the staff and the citizen sponsors of these particular versions of how to settle this. The reason I'm a little bit hung up on this coming to us as a joint effort of a couple of citizen petitioners and staff is that the normal order of things would be that we would turn to staff to sort of render an assessment of the articles before us. And so, of course, staff views would be weighed, but we would also have to, as the select board, take under consideration whether there's going to be any liability risk for the town from any of the various measures. And, if one of them is weak in terms of its susceptibility to a challenge in court, we need that assessment from our legal counsel's office. John, again, who I respect enormously, is in the legal counsel's office, but he's not the head of the legal counsel's office. And having not heard from the legal counsel's office an assessment of whether there's any issue of liability or at least vulnerability, I'm just finding it very confusing to have this brought to us as being a joint enterprise of staff and a couple of citizen petitioners.
I am Joe Callahan is online.
I would like to add just briefly onto what John said. This, and I had mentioned this to David as this progression started. I am very uncomfortable that staff has signed on to this. I don't know where my agnostic advice is coming from now. I respect everybody. I know they work hard, but they now have signed on. Paulie and John Buchheit have signed on to one of the articles, one of the motions, and I don't know where I'm getting my agnostic independent advice from right now.
So I think so. Couple things here. I agree, and I apologize, and I'll speak to the team about this. Staff shouldn't be putting their names on warrant articles, so that shouldn't happen going forward. Warrant articles can be advanced by departments and presented to the select board, and the select board has to sign off on them. But we should not be attaching our names to individual petitioner articles. So I apologize that I was not on top of this and was part of this discussion. We'll have a conversation internally about how to handle that. Again, I'm not mad. I'm just saying this is an issue. It's an issue on my end, making sure that we are all on the same page about what we attach our names to. With that said, we are, this isn't because this is an issue that has the issues that John raises about, legal and so forth and many competing issues. I think we would be remiss if we didn't offer you advice when asked about which of these do you think is the best balance, and remiss if we didn't work with everybody, including Dick Benka and, and the original petitioners and anyone else who asks for our support in order to make these things better bills. So I think the optics of a bill being of a proposed substitute amendment being labeled a staff substitute, not ideal under these circumstances, and something we need to discuss to make sure going forward that's not that there are clear procedures about when staff attaches their name to anything. But I think the team's advice for you regarding of these, what do you think is the balancing option? I do think if you ask for that information, which it sounds like you're asking for, we should be giving it to you. So I agree with you, and we will work on getting the balance of that right.
So I do have a legal question that maybe Joe could address it, or Jonathan, if he's online. Is Joe online?
Joe's online.
So, Joe, good evening. This is related to the building commissioner, the legality of the building commissioner being able to issue a building permit that's in violation of local zoning. My understanding is that GLC Chapter 48 prohibits the building commissioner from issuing a building permit that would violate any local zoning bylaw or ordinance. So specifically, Section 7 of GLC 48 states that the building commissioner or other designated official shall withhold a permit if the proposed construction, alteration, or use would violate a zoning bylaw or ordinance. So does the Pollock version even have legal standing if the building commissioner is not allowed to issue a building permit without approval by the ZBA, which is the only authority that has the approval to issue variances?
So I wouldn't say that's, by the way, Joe Callahan, Town Council. So I wouldn't say that's the only authority of the building commissioner, because that's his authority under state law. But what we're dealing with here is federal law. And under the Supremacy Clause of the United States Constitution, we have to follow federal law, even if it conflicts with state law. So if the state law says only the building commissioner, has that authority, but federal law says we have to grant reasonable accommodations, then now all of a sudden the building commissioner has that authority to issue reasonable accommodations, even if they don't comply with zoning.
Well, Joe, not necessarily. If the ZBA can issue a reasonable accommodation, it doesn't say that. It doesn't say specifically who has to issue it. But if our ZBA can issue the reasonable accommodation, why would we need to grant special authority to the building commissioner or the ADA coordinator?
So John can get into the finer details on this. And by the way, all the things that John has said is my complete support. We've been in close communication. He's been dealing with many meetings, but we talk many times a week about this issue, and we have for more than a year. So whatever John says has my complete support. But and this is the kind of difficulty with the requirements of protecting the rights of the disabled in zoning. Sometimes there shouldn't be a hearing. So sometimes there should be. And this is the difficulty in this area, that it's not so clear cut that, the Benka version is best, or the Pollock-Penzill version is best, or the petitioner's version is best. We don't know that answer. This area of law is evolving. We don't have good, examples throughout Massachusetts or even the country to say, that particular version has been adopted and upheld by the courts. So John has been doing phenomenal work trying to figure out what is going to be the best version that a court will, uphold. We thought we did that the first time with the petitioner, because if you recall, we worked with her on her request for reasonable accommodation, worked in a way that was more favorable to her than the abutter. However, then when the abutter took that to court, the court criticized us for that process. So we're trying to learn this, process as best we can when there's no clear-cut guidelines other than we have to provide reasonable accommodations in the area of zoning.
Michael.
So I just have a question about, I guess this actually applies to all three different motions before us. And do all three motions change our zoning bylaw in order to give the building commissioner permission to make this ruling? And if that is part of our zoning bylaw, does that mean that, according to our zoning bylaw, the building commissioner can make this ruling?
I don't think so, and I'll defer to John on which do and which don't, but I don't think all of them do.
You don't think all of the
Versions, the
versions do that?
Pollock and petitioner's version do that.
So whether they give the building commissioner the authority, yeah, they actually do, but there's the Benka version does require that be consistent with the guidance provided by the ZBA. So with that caveat, I think, yes, they all give the building commissioner the ability to grant the reasonable accommodation.
As part of our zoning code?
Correct.
So I guess I didn't get an answer to Paul's question as to whether the statute he referred to applies or precludes the building commissioner from having the role that he's given in two of these petitions or two of these articles.
I'll let John answer that. I thought I did, but if I'll let John
Yeah.
take a better
No, I
description.
think Joe did hit the nail on the head, which is when we're faced with a federal civil rights law that does require certain acts, I believe that we can, craft a process. I mean, remember, really what
I think what Paul is getting at is that the ZBA has the authority and that sort of provides the ability, that addresses the civil rights issue.
I mean, certainly
Okay.
the ZBA could be given, I think, that authority. I think that's fine, but I think it's equally appropriate to give it to the building commissioner is my position.
And again, this is where the play in the joints is. I mean, I'm trying to play then devil's advocate, not necessarily devil's advocate, but making the point that what is the purpose of the civil rights law in question? It's to avoid disabled people being run through the ringer to get the accommodations they need to do their to handle their day-to-day lives.
But the ZBA going through the ringer though.
Certainly, I think the current petitioner would argue yes, that putting up their disability to a public. Again, I'm
public process,
right? A public process like that, putting it up to the ZBA, which has there's a political valence there. And so, what they're going to say is subjecting my rights to the caprices of the ZBA is unconstitutional. Now, is that true? I think you could make an argument either way. But that's the argument they're going to make is that it's not fair to make me go through this.
Jez, isn't the measure that you can't add any additional steps, right? You can't require any additional steps. You can't place an additional burden on an applicant for an accommodation.
So you
right?
can't unfairly.
You can't unfairly burden them, right? So first I'll start leading where I'm going. I mean, I support the Benka version of this. I think it's the appropriate place. It has all the good stuff that's in Pollock, but it leaves zoning variance guidance where it rests and where it should rest is with the ZBA. They're lawyers. That's why we're very, very selective about the ZBA. The ZBA has the authority. The only ones in Brookline that has the authority to grant variations from our zoning code. The building commissioner comes out of the trades. They're typically, they're not lawyers. They're about implementing and measuring and identifying when something is outside of our building code. But the nuances of law, of even ADA law, is not in the purview of the wheelhouse of the building commissioner. Now, I have a lot of respect for our current building commissioner. I may not have a lot of respect for our future building commissioner. I just don't know who we'll get. I feel pretty strongly that there's nothing in front of me and I've read all this stuff. I've got reams of it here. case law and all that other stuff that says that we need to hand over decisions of variance to the building commissioner when we have an extremely competent and capable ZBA and planning board and a process that's outlined by Mr. Banker in support of the work that Pollock has done that expedites the process and protects confidentiality. There's no reason to short circuit the process and hand it over to the building commissioner. That's my view, and I'm prepared to support the Banker version.
Michael.
So first of all, I want to again express my appreciation for all of the people who have put in the time and effort for this. My deep concern is with the issue that Chaz raised, which is how much of the needs of the applicant and the understanding of what is a reasonable accommodation gets subjected to a public process. Because first of all, from my perspective, this is not going to be a common occurrence because in order for this sort of situation to arise, it would mean that a person is applying for a zoning variance or accommodation that is outside of our zoning code, that they are in possession of a home, that they actually own the home in order to do this, and that they're willing to pay for it and go through this whole process. So all of those conditions on top of the condition that they are experiencing with their disability to subject them to a public process which brings that disability to the public for public review seems grossly unfair. And so I appreciate that there are constraints on what the ZBA might be able to consider in the various versions. But I don't think that there are enough safeguards in place in those public processes that prevent the public members who want to engage or question the legitimacy of the accommodation or the need from raising those questions. And I think for the town to provide a platform for raising those questions is itself a potential liability to the town as it exposes us to a civil rights concern on behalf of the applicant.
Okay, where are we here? Looks like there's a
Thank you.
division.
Hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry. Dick,
Thank you very much. Let me try to address a couple of the issues that have just been raised. I think you all have my memo, which outlined the reasons that I think the ZBA rather than the building commissioner is appropriate for making these decisions. But I want to first, and in no particular order, address the question of timing. John indicated that under my version, it would be 45 days plus 20 days or plus 30 days plus another 35 days for the ZBA to decide. And to be clear, the 45-day period is the period in both of our proposals that applies when, and I'll read from mine, the decision shall be issued within 45 days of the completed application unless the request would require relief from zoning requirements or approval from any board or commission or is extended as called for elsewhere under this section. So that 45 days is not additive to the planning board and ZBA process. That 45-day period is the period that applies if the building, that would apply if an individual came in now who is not disabled and wanted to pull a permit that would not require any zoning relief, for example. Under the proposal that I have, I did have a 30-day period for the planning board. It was pointed out that, and that actually comes from state law, it was pointed out that under our local bylaw, there is a non-binding 20-day period. I'm going to, in a revision, reduce the 30 days to 20 days. And then there's 35 days for the ZBA. So it would be a total of 55 days, plus any time that the building commissioner is asking for more information, that applies under both. People asking for a site visit, that applies under both. The one difference is, and a significant difference is, that if you have a contested case under the Pollock version, the ZBA only gets it, the building commissioner makes the call. The planning board makes a recommendation or advice to the building commissioner. It's the building commissioner's call, and then the ZBA gets called in on appeal under state law. And in those contested cases, the ZBA then has 100 days. And only after that do you go to the judicial appeal process. Under the version that I have, the ZBA has their position that they have under the current process. The building, and they say to the building commissioner when there's a denial letter for a building permit, yes, there's a variance, yes, there's a special permit, or no, there isn't. The building commissioner has to comply with that, but it's the ZBA decision is over and done with at that point. And then you would, as John mentioned, the appeal would be to court. So there's certainly, in the contested cases, there is an enormous risk of much more extensive delay with the Pollock version, in my view. You asked a question about 40A Section 7 and the legal questions. Yes, federal law does govern. It does preempt local law, but it only preempts local law if local law is violative of the federal standards. And there is nothing that says, yes, you as a locality can ignore state law, which says the building commissioner cannot make this decision. There is nothing in federal law that gives Brookline the authority to violate the state statute in the way that it allocates responsibility. If Brookline were treating disabled claims differently from the claims of individuals without disabilities, then there would be an issue, but that's not an issue here. And federal law makes patently clear, as I've quoted, that the municipalities should be following their regular procedures normally, unless there is some unfairness, discrimination, and so forth. But there is no basis for saying that here. And let me just finally respond to Michael's point. There would be a public meeting. People would be able to make their comments under either provision at the planning board. There is also a public hearing under my version before the ZBA, which, as I've mentioned, avoids this 100-day problem, and also brings the ZBA in with their expertise into the mix. Under my provision, and I would ask you to look at, I believe it's section 7, confidentiality. I have expressly quoted the language of the Massachusetts Office on Disability, regarding the inquiry and the limits of the inquiry that a zoning board or a planning board can have that will protect the privacy rights of an applicant. They can, if deciding whether a modification is necessary and determining whether an alternative modification would provide equal access, which both provisions have, mine adds the specific language. They can request limited documentation from a medical provider only if a disability or need for modification is not obvious or known, and that request has to be limited to confirming a disability-based limitation and explaining the need that the requested modification would address, directly out of the Mass Office on Disability, with the further provision in mind explicitly calling for executive sessions which would apply to any discussion, quote, of the physical condition or mental health of an individual. So I've made a very serious effort to build privacy, confidentiality into this process. And let me just add one more thing. There are wording issues that I've identified with the Pollock version that I believe are inconsistent with federal and state guidance. And I've flagged some of those at the end of my memo. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. David Pollock, would you like to say a few words?
Good evening, everyone. David Pollock, town meeting member from Precinct 11. You know, I'm not a courtroom lawyer. I really think Dick is leaning a little weighted into a lot of his arguments. I think at a very high level, the issue is not whether you can have a process that looks exactly like zoning and you can have the zoning board make these decisions. It's really whether you should, we should, because this is disability rights. That's the framework here. In terms of Select Board Member Van Scoyak's concern about a couple of town citizens, you know, petitioning, this is the advisory committee's land use, zoning, and sustainability subcommittee that's been working for a month and a half on a daily basis with staff to craft a policy for you, for town meeting and for the town, that would be the best policy to implement, because the entire subcommittee, which was deadlocked 3-3 about the Benka version versus the Pollock version, all felt that changes should be made to the Oates version. And so I asked Mark Penzel, retired employment lawyer with extensive experience in reasonable accommodation, to take this over and lead it. And Mark has worked very, very closely with John Buckheit, who's been leading it for you, for the executive, for I don't know how many years. And what we asked Director of Regulatory Planning, Polly Selko, and your town council to do for us is to help guide us to the best policy for the town. You can call that advocacy, you can sort the issues about naming, but we just wanted them to help craft a policy that was best for the town, because they are your experts who have been through this, through the fire with this particular case, and then developed for you a policy and took it to the Mass Office of Disabilities in January, presented it, got feedback, have been talking to the Attorney General. So we wanted to involve them in crafting the policy, whereas Mr. Benka simply wanted John Buckheit to tell him it was okay to do it the way he wanted. And he has worked very hard and consulted extensively with John on the question of whether his pathway is legal. Now, Mr. Warren has said he's not sure that this is even remotely legal to have the building commissioner take on this role that is by state law supposed to be done by the zoning board. And I can only tell you that in a month and a half of daily meetings with town council, it has never once been suggested to me that there was anything wrong with the zoning bylaw, as Mr. Rubenstein said, changing the language in the bylaw to move this around within the bylaw, hence not violating the bylaw, if that's now the bylaw, to have the building commissioner do this one piece. But by all means, don't ask me, ask town council, and the town council can consult with the AGO or whatever to if somebody said to me, can't do it, the building commissioner shouldn't be making this decision, that's illegal, then it wouldn't be in this draft. That's silly. Like, we would never have done that. So the reason that I sent you my short memo, very proud of how short it is, and the draft that was heard by advisory last night is because I looked at your packet for tonight and it only had the original motion. The other thing I want to say about process is it wasn't just that we tried to craft a good bylaw, but as you heard, Dick took what we had brought to a certain level and then bifurcated it and came up with a second version of what the subcommittee had done with. So we worked on top of the good work of the Petitioners Council, and that's really foundational within all three of them. And then we did a lot, and then Dick took it to a choice for town meeting and for you tonight. We've had every board recommend referral. And it's clear to all of us, I think, that town meeting doesn't love referral. Many town meeting members don't love repeated beating the gong of referral. It's an important tool, but it should be used wisely. And so I'm concerned that may not be the best path. And that's why I'm here, is to have you consider whether referral is the best path. It would be, it's very easy for you to refer, because all you have to do is affirm your previous decision, and no other board has recommended anything other than referral. So that's not a heavy lift for you tonight. But if you would like to resolve this issue, one of the first questions I heard tonight of town council was, is this ready? I think you were asking just about one version was the question. But I think you will find that your advisors, your staff will tell you that all three of these are very lawyered, and any one of them is ready. It doesn't mean that they couldn't be better. It doesn't mean you couldn't convert one to a policy, implement it as a select board policy for 6 months, a year, 3 years. Who knows how many cases would come up until you're sure the policy is working well. There's advantages to policies. You can change them easily. You don't have to wait till town meeting. So you could take all the hard work that Dick has done, Dawn has done, we have done, and take it back to the select board as is being recommended. And then, ask your staff, don't delay. We'd like to vote this in 4 weeks, and you guys can adopt a policy. I'm not sure that this won't still, it may not survive. The referral vote may not prevail. And then there'll be potentially, right now, there's only one version that's been moved. And, we have 15 hours if any others are going to be moved. But I think that they can be moved by other parties. It's not up to me whether or not the version that I've carried this far is moved before town meeting. So if you would like to close this issue, what I urge you to do is pick a version and recommend favorable action on that version to town meeting. And that then the select board would move the version that it prefers, because advisory is not moving a motion. Somebody has to move the petitioner's motion because she's not a town meeting member, but I'm assuming there'll be somebody who will do that for her. But you can move a version of it and give it to Melissa by noon tomorrow. And then it'll be your motion as a substitute motion for the original. And then I think it would have a better chance of getting a 2/3 vote and being enacted into law.
David?
Could you explain your preference for building commissioner as opposed to ZBA and having the final say?
Well, I think, you know, you've heard it from staff. I was very pleased to have them kind of answer those questions. I think Polly put it pretty well. I think John put it pretty well. This is a compromise. This is a middle proposal. I think that this notion that the petitioner's original motion is very focused on the needs and situation, which we all are sympathetic to, and the rights under federal law of the applicant, the person with a disability. And it raises those above all others, and in fact excludes other rights. And, you know, our subcommittee felt that there should be a role for the public. And so we've put in what we feel is in our version, not the whole subcommittee, a pretty robust role for the planning board, both in a public meeting and acting as a board. But then if they recommend any change to what's been presented to them, 2 members of the planning board and a town planner then go back into the interactive process that's private, that's with the building commissioner, to further try to get the right outcome. And it's a limited public exposure. It's 1 meeting. We were told that previously the town in dealing with I think in dealing, you can ask town council, but I think as they were developing the policy, or else in the Dawn Oates case, I'm not sure which one, John Buckheit was advised, or staff was advised by the Massachusetts Office on Disabilities not to have the Disability Commission ruling on a disability, because it's very hard to manage privacy and information under those circumstances. And a number of us have extrapolated that fewer meetings is better in terms of a burden and a chilling effect on the applicants, but also that in terms of our bylaw passing muster with the AGO and the MOD, that fewer meetings is better. That's a surmise. So this splits the difference, and it offers a compromise that also one of the reasons that I think not going with the Dawn Oates version is a good idea is that I think you have fewer angry people who are less likely to sue. And so maybe you actually get to a better outcome for the applicant, even though you're putting them through a public meeting. I do want to go back to something Dick said about duration and just clarify that, yes, after the conclusion of the reasonable accommodation process, under my proposal, it can be appealed to the zoning board, and that could take considerable time. But that is outside of the reasonable accommodation. The town has fulfilled its responsibilities and granted the reasonable accommodation. And then there's appeals that could go to zoning as well as to the courts. But it's outside of the reasonable accommodation. So the duration that it could take for somebody to actually have their accommodation constructed could, as Dick said, be longer under our scenario, under our pathway. But the town's obligation, when an applicant walks in the door and asks for a reasonable accommodation, that process is truncated and concluded sooner under our process.
In terms of the issue around expertise, that was raised, that some members seem to think that perhaps the ZBA has a greater expertise on reasonable accommodations than the building commissioner would. Although I believe the language in your proposal.
I think I said zoning, but not.
Zoning, okay, zoning. That the language in your proposal also talks about consulting with the ADA coordinator and others. There's nothing that would preclude the building commissioner from consulting with an expert on reasonable accommodation law, correct?
No, that this process has the ADA coordinator kind of supported by the Massachusetts Office on Disability, but also working with professional, architectural and land use and building staff on the refining the questions of like how the ADA, I mean, in the way I think of it, at least, and this is what was intended, is the ADA coordinator works with the applicant to figure out what is needed, but then what that looks like is the interactive process where the town can say, not so fast, we understand you need to solve this aspect of the problem, but we think you can do it in a different way. And at a certain point, the town says, this is our view of the reasonable accommodation. And if you don't agree, we're at the end of the interactive process. It could come, they could get everything they want, they could not get everything they want. And in either case, that's what's intended. That's every bit as much what Dick intends in his version. He just has the zoning board doing all of that, which in my view, that's more sticky and fraught and potentially, inappropriate. But
when you say that in Dick's version that the ZBA is doing all that, actually the building commissioner is doing all the coordination, right? He's doing all the coordination. It's not the ZBA. The ZBA is at the end of the process where he then makes, right? He then sends it to them and they say, here's the zoning, what you can do and what you can't do. And he sends the decision back. They send the decision back to the building commissioner.
I
right?
would,
So I don't think the ZBA was even involved in it throughout his process.
yeah, I don't think you're right. I mean, I would be
We asked Dick.
I would be much more friendly to Dick's if that was the process. But at advisory last night, he affirmed that in his version, the zoning board can get deep into the weeds of whether this person really has a disability, what the nature of their disability is, how many cars do they need in their garage, do they need a bathroom? He has said all of that is fair game for the ZBA to inquire about.
So they can inquire, but they're not running the process, is my point. That's what the building commissioner is the point person for the process.
Yes, in prior to submitting to planning, it's pretty much exactly as Dick said. It hasn't gone to zoning yet, and it's going to look the same in both versions. There is a fair amount the same in both.
Okay, I don't want to get into a debate, but I see Dick has his hand up, or he did.
No,
No? Okay.
I'm fine. I'm fine. Thank you.
Michael?
David, I'm wondering if you can clarify the planning board's function in the Pollock version in terms of when they get some sort of signal, I don't know, bat signal or whatever it is from the building commissioner that they have to take action. Sort of what is the scope of that action and what are the inputs and outputs that they're providing to the process?
Right. So that's very easy. So there's going to be, before I get to that, there's going to be a period depending on the applicant and their skill set and preparation where the application needs to be completed. And some applicant with a disability may come in with adequate architectural plans. They've done their homework. They have professional advisors. It's ready to go to planning instantly. Others may say, I really need an accommodation. And the question is, well, what do you need? And they say, something I can't get into my, so then it's like, well, you need plans. So that process has to happen. When the application is complete, that application will look just like what Polycelco asks for in any zoning relief case. It's going to have enough information for the planning board to do its normal thing. And what would happen under both schemes. But the language that Attorney Buckheit recommended was to just reference our zoning bylaw in terms of what the planning board does. So they just do what they always do. If you need setback relief or whatever it is, it gets sent to the planning board. They send out public notices to abutters and everybody else. Everything is exactly as they always would. And they hold a public meeting by, they listen to, people, they always take public comment as a matter of policy. That's just what they do. There was a question about why is it a public meeting and not a public hearing? And the answer is because our zoning bylaw only requires a public meeting of the planning board. So if we would be discriminatory if we said in the case of this, it needed a hearing. So we can't say that, but Polly assures us that the planning board always allows public comment. So that that's done. And then they write up their recommendation. They say, you should plant a tree over here. You should do this. You should do that. The architects, push and pull. They do their normal thing. And then they create their standard output, but instead of sending it to the zoning board, they send it back to the building commissioner. And if they don't have any changes, they're done. And then it goes to the building commissioner, but they approved it, and the building commissioner can say, okay, we're good to you're done because everybody agrees, the applicant, whatever. But if they have a change, then there's a 6G, section 6G says that a town planner, the chair of the planning board, and another member, either the chair or that member being an architect, shall all work with everybody, back with the building commissioner on the back and forth that, could be contentious because of, anyway.
So for example, if they propose a change that violates the need or what would be a reasonable accommodation because they're not considering that question in their hearing, then that would go back into a private process.
Yes, although I would hope that Polly and town council and everybody, this doesn't happen very often. And I think we should all assume that the boards are being heavily supported. They're not left on their own when they're doing a reasonable accommodation hearing. So hopefully if they were about to vote something that was obviously discriminatory, that they would be advised not to vote that. But yes, it would go back into the private.
Okay, so I'd like to see if we can bring this to a conclusion. We have 4 options, but the first option may resolve it, and that is the status quo. Our current position is referral. Is there any interest in referring or continuing where we are? Okay, I don't see any. So will someone move reconsideration?
Move reconsideration.
All in favor of reconsidering warrant article 14 and 15, I guess. John Van Scoyac?
Aye.
Paul Warren?
Aye.
David Corman?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Okay. And I guess I know which way the wind's blowing, so I'll vote aye too. Okay, so now the question is, what is it that we're going to recommend to town meeting? I assume that no one wants to recommend the original Don Oates version, but I may be wrong. Michael Rubenstein, are you about to say something?
I'm just, one of the things that I'm trying to understand between the original version and the Pollock version is if you strip out the appeal process in the Pollock version, I guess the substantive differences is that it goes to the planning board in the Pollock version, but not in the original petition.
There's no notice or anything under the original
Right.
version.
It all has to do with the notice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Could-
Okay, it's all.
Actually, we could do a quick straw poll, see if there's any support for the original version. I mean, do you support the original version? Do you want to?
Well, I think it's appropriate to get that question answered
Right.
by town council before. I mean, I don't think there's any support for it, but that's still an important issue or a question that should be answered. John Burkhardt, you want to do it, or Joe Kyle?
Sure. Yeah, so so I understand what you want to understand is the difference between the original, the petitioner's version and the Pollock version, is that correct?
Right, excluding the whole appeal process, which as a block, I realize is different.
Well, actually both have a similar appeal process. They both allow an appeal to the ZBA. Both, just to be clear on that.
Okay, I stand corrected.
Okay, yeah, the original petitioner's warrant article contemplated that happening. I think the primary difference, which has already been, I think, hit on, is that fact that there is notice, in fact, there's notice twice. There's notice of the planning board hearing, and then there's also notice at the time that the decision is issued, and people being notified that there's an appeal right. So that's the big difference. I mean, there's also we've added at the end some other sort of things that the building commissioner can do, which include it's in section 12. It's actually identical in both the Benka version and the Pollock version. One is to recognize that that improvements can be removed when there's no longer a need for the accommodation. So if somebody has a structure where it's reasonable to require it be removed, that the accommodation can be conditioned on that. We also explicitly state that measures to reduce impact on the surrounding uses can be imposed where such measures do not constitute an unreasonable financial burden. So kind of, sort of incorporating kind of the concept of, I would say, countervailing amenities where, where it's not an unreasonable financial burden for the applicant, they can, put up shrubs and so on and so forth.
Okay, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Can I get one clarification?
Okay.
John, so you said that under the petitioners, the Oates version, the original petitioner, that between that and Pollock, they both had an appeal, but isn't the Oates version only allows the applicant to appeal? That's the only
Yeah, no, that is not, so they can both appeal. What they put on the, they give an advantage to the applicant in that it doesn't allow an abutter to appeal until the building permit is issued. And I think the thinking here is that
there's no time, right?
well, that you shouldn't make it's an undue burden on an applicant to make them defend something that in fact they might not ever build. So they're requiring that that the appeal wait until the permit is issued. So, and that is actually the same in the Pollock version as in the petitioner's version.
But neither of those require a notice to the abutter, right?
No, actually, the Pollock version is different in that it provides the notice to abutters of the decision that their accommodation has been granted, and it also requires the building commissioner to notify the abutters at the time that the building permit is issued, so that the abutters know when the clock is running.
That's the Pollock version, but the Oates version has no notice.
Correct.
So basically, that the building permit's been issued when the hammers start coming out.
Well,
I don't think there's any support for the Oates version.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Let's get a sense of the board, and then we'll make a motion in favor of one or the other of the Benka and Pollock version. What do people?
You want to just go around to a straw quick?
Okay, let's do it that way.
John?
Go in reverse order. Michael Rubenstein.
Pollock version.
Okay, Pollock. Who's next? David.
Pollock.
Paul.
Benka.
John.
Benka.
And I actually go for Pollock. So
Okay.
I move that we move the Pollock version to town meeting. What else I need to say? Nothing? Okay. Well, wait, you're about to get your version approved.
I just have a request if you think it's appropriate that it henceforth be called the select board version.
No, sorry.
Oh, no, it becomes a select board version
It's
if you vote.
a select board motion, but it's not it's
I mean,
Pollock version.
we'll call it the motion for your version. Once we vote on it, it becomes the select board.
Nice
motion.
try.
And I would ask just one housekeeping matter. Can you please work with staff? I know that, again, this is my fault for not being on better top of this. I've been trying to juggle a lot of different things. Can we make sure that the article description doesn't officially call it a staff amendment, but makes clear that it was developed with staff's help, but it doesn't have staff listed as drafters? Thank you.
Okay, all in favor of the select board moving the Pollock version of warrant article? I guess we're only talking about 14 now. We haven't had discussion of 15.
We're doing 14 now, yep.
Okay, I think I said enough. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. John Van Scoyac.
No.
Paul Warren.
No.
David Perlman.
Aye.
Michael Rubenstein,
Aye.
and chair votes aye. So it now becomes the select board version or select board, whatever.
Motion.
Motion.
Motion. Okay, next, warrant article 15. I mean, that's fairly straightforward. We have someone to locate this one.
John, are there any changes that need to be made to warrant Article 15 as a result of the board adopting this version of 14?
I don't believe so, but I would reserve my right to, can I, no, I don't think, I'm almost certain it doesn't, but I would like to perhaps if I have I could have a quick look at it. But I think as long as 14 is being moved, the two kind of coexist together easily and they work together. And Tina, if she has any,
But
Tina, if this year.
David, 15 has been modified. It was amended. Yeah.
It has been, yes.
I mean,
Select
you may,
board currently refer, the select board currently have a referral motion. That's your current position.
Right. But David, 15 was amended.
Wait, Bob, don't just
Oh.
speak out. Okay, what are we, who's speaking here? John?
Sure, yeah, so I'll just quickly, let me give you the history. So since you last voted, right, Preservation Commission has taken this, well, first, there's been some modifications made to it, some that have primarily by Tina McCarthy, did a terrific job and I looked it over and it has gone to the Preservation Commission, who had one really a very minor change, which I'm happy to explain, but essentially what has happened is that there is now an administrative process that's been created. I think the process is the same. The demo delay is a two-step process. The first step is that the property is looked at and determined whether it is significant, and only if it is determined to be historically significant, I'm generalizing, will a stay be imposed. And so the process is the same until if the stay is imposed, but thereafter, typically there needs to be another hearing where the applicant comes in and they request a lift of the stay. What we've created is a process where there's now an administrative process that includes two members of the Preservation Commission, one of whom shall be an architect, as well as a preservation planner. And the three of them will then become involved in the interactive process, working with the building commissioner and the applicant to try and reach an agreement on what might be able to be saved, what aspects of the building, without while also allowing the needs of the disabled person to be met. So the change, so there was a slight language change by the Preservation Commission, which just added that this requirement that it be two commission members, one of whom is an architect.
Okay, I move, any discussion of that?
So just to be clear, so we're all understanding what you're about to move. Is it because other bodies have recommended referral, and that's what.
Yeah, last month.
And so I'm sorry, I think I jumped the gun because we have to talk about reconsideration.
I thought you jointly moved reconsideration of 14 and 15. So 15 is back on the table.
Oh, okay. So in terms of 15, are we just moving to adopt a substitute motion or what are we moving?
John, help us out here. Unless Paul,
I believe that we're going to vote on moving favorable action on Article 15 as amended by the Preservation Commission. That's what I believe is the one that there's extensive red lines in our packet.
Yeah, that is correct. And I do want to clarify also that I think preservation didn't, I think, well, the advisory committee voted to refer, but then there are other committees that didn't. I think CTO&S approved 15 as modified, as did the Preservation Commission.
Okay, so I move favorable action on warrant article 15 as amended by the Preservation Commission. All in favor, John Van Scoyac?
Aye.
Paul Warren?
Aye.
David Perlman?
Aye.
Michael Rubenstein.
Aye.
And chair votes aye.
Bernard, I have one
Yes,
question,
go
one
ahead.
clarification. So John and I voted against 14.
Right.
But we're supporting 15. Do they go
Well, that
together?
puts you in a
Okay.
quandary, doesn't it?
I think it's all right. What you can do is you just means you have to break them out, right? The town meeting, you'd have to call for a separate vote at town meeting, right? If you want to support 15 but not 14.
Is this going to be one debate and,
I would imagine it would be, well, I think at this point, because the recommendations are starting to diverge, the moderator might take them separately, but it's at the moderator's discretion.
could we go back? Get
And-
someone, I would actually like to change. I'm going to vote no on 15 since I
Do
voted.
you
no.
want to reconsider warrant article 15? Okay,
Yes.
okay. All in favor of reconsideration? Can't we just raise hands? John Van Scoyac,
Aye.
Paul Warren,
Aye.
Dave Perlman,
Aye.
Michael Rubenstein.
No.
No, and chair votes aye. So we're reconsidering. So all in favor? of-
Just one comment though. Technically, doesn't somebody who
It is-
voted in the other, so I
Yes,
will,
that is correct. How I was.
I will be courteous though.
Proxy for me.
I will be courteous and allow Paul to change his
We'll
vote, so-
record that as David moving. Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you. Good Robert's rules. Good looking out.
Okay.
Well done.
Okay, now that we've legally called for reconsideration, I move approval of warrant article 15. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. John Van Scoyac,
Aye.
Paul Warren,
No.
David Perlman,
Aye.
Michael Rubenstein.
As amended by the Preservation Commission.
Right, it's, as
Aye.
previously voted, yeah, and chair votes aye. Okay, so the record shows
Thank you.
how
Done.
we
Done.
voted. Okay, that is the end of our agenda unless someone from the audience would like to make public comment at the end. Yes.
Just before then, if I may, I'd like to really thank David Pollock and John Buckhite, Dick Benka as well, even though his amendment's not the one that carried, in working very hard on this. I initially voted not to recommend referral because I wanted this to get done. Disability accommodations is really a core civil right. It's critically important. I didn't want that potentially getting delayed indefinitely, which can often happen with referrals. So I'm really glad that so many from advisory committee and staff stepped up and put in the work so that we could propose something concrete to town meeting.
Just want to thank Polysilco, Tina and Sarah as well. This really was a whole of government effort to try and figure this out and to support everyone involved, Dan Bennett, the whole team involved in this. Thank you all very much.
Right.
And all the members of the land use subcommittee. Mark.
All of whom do not have to continue this struggle if town meeting passes.
Mr. Chair, I had two quick
Yes.
questions before we break up. First of all, I think I heard reference to that this is going to require a 2/3 vote. Is that,
That's
that's
Yeah.
correct? Okay. The other thing is, yeah. I just wanted to mention something about Memorial Day coming up and I don't see the information, but are we having our traditional?
Yes, our traditional Memorial Day programming, we'll make sure that that's front and center on the website. It begins in the morning with the decoration of the memorials and the graveyards. We'll proceed to the War Memorial. I believe the program begins at 11 a.m. on Memorial Day, Monday.
The one at Town Hall,
One
at
at Town
the
Hall.
War Memorial, but there's the prior
Yes.
visit to Walnut Hills
The cemetery,
Cemetery and then
decoration
Walnut
of the
Street
cemeteries.
Cemetery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I will make sure that all of those prior are
Great.
listed on the website.
Great.
Thank you for the reminder.
Yeah, thank you for reminding people of that. People anticipate Memorial Day among other holidays and really.
Hopefully it'll be good weather.
Yeah.
And you have a public comment?
Oh, I thought I closed the meeting, but okay.
Oh, you have it.
Regina Frawley, town meeting member from 16. I'm glad the issue of somebody brought up just now about parliamentary procedure. Only those on the winning side can move for reconsideration, number one. And number two, if you weren't ever part of a discussion and a vote, you actually cannot move for reconsideration. So those are the two things. And tonight, your comments were wonderful. I loved everything you asked and every comment you made. You're right on point. but you couldn't vote for reconsideration. You could then listen to the discussion and vote on that, whatever your decision was after that. But for the actual reconsideration, it's not allowed. Thank you.
Okay, with that, the meeting ends.
Interesting.
And, good night, everyone, and